First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. I do have a couple things that I'd like to maybe move around a little bit. Number 3, I'd like to place after number 6 for your information after the broadband feasibility discussion. That'll allow us to get a couple of our presenters to be able to leave before we discuss various matters. In addition, I'd like to incorporate a item after the audit report to go into executive session. Unless there's any other changes, and you agree with that, like a motion for approval of the agenda. Need a second? Jeff, is that you? So we have a first and second. All those in favor? Jason made the motion. Jeff seconded it. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Same. All right. So we'll start out with the audit report from Chris Hawkins.
Appreciate y'all having me here tonight. Bill would have been the one that was here last year presented to you, but I'm Chris Hawkins. I was the manager on the audit this year and last. Had an opportunity to work with the group here just a couple of months ago. Everybody was very helpful along the way. So we appreciate all the help, make the process go as smooth as possible. I passed out our audit report to everybody. You should have a bound copy in front of you. I'm going to bounce around a little bit as far as what order we go in. So if you can all start out on page 22. Go to the back first. Everybody's catching up. In addition to the audited financial statements, our audit report, auditing standards dictate that there's certain things that we're required to communicate to a group like this. And on page 22, the title is Auditor Communication to those charged with governance, which is a board of directors. The next couple of pages basically outline all the standard communications that are required. Now, having said that, this is what I would consider a clean report. It's more or less the template communications that you have in any audit. I'll go quickly. Under significant audit findings, we note that there were no changes to your accounting policies during the year. The application to existing policies has not changed. Last year, I think, for example, would be an exception. Anytime we have significant changes in accounting standards or anything like that, we would let this group know that was the case this year. If there were any particularly sensitive estimates or sensitive disclosures, we would be required to let you know about that. The most sensitive of all disclosures or numbers that we point out to this group is the useful lives of all your fixed assets, which is a pretty standard communication to this type of entity. At the top of page 23, if there were any difficulties encountered in performing the audit, we would be required to let you know about that. As I said, this group's great to work with. We appreciate all the help along the way. There are no difficulties for us to report. If there were any adjustments we made as part of the audit, corrected or uncorrected misstatements, we would be required to let you know about that. That's not the case. We did not have any adjustments. If we had any disagreements with management, and disagreements defined here as financial, accounting, reporting, or auditing matter, if we disagreed on anything with management along those lines, once again, it would go in this letter. That's not the case. We didn't run into any such disagreements like that. And if we found out that management went to other auditors or accountants for second opinions, if they're opinion shopping on certain issues or accounting matters, we would be required to let you know about that. That's not the case either. So as I said, this is more or less, it's our template communications. It's a very clean report. It's kind of the report card of the audit, and this would be a clean report. I'll now direct to page 17, a couple of pages before that. One of the other required communications that outside of the audit report itself, financial statements, is a report on internal control matters. And as part of our audit, we're not required to actively seek out any issues. We're required to obtain an understanding of internal controls, verify that the processes that we're told about have been implemented. It's at a much higher level than some of the detailed testing we do on the numbers. And if there's any room for improvement or suggestions that we have, we're required to let this group know about that. At the top of page 18, we only came across one item that fits that description. And this should seem familiar. This is one that we had in all of our cooperative audits. It's one that you would have had last year. And it's that you have capital in all your associated organizations and you track it, you account for it as prescribed by RUS, which follows the equity method of accounting. There's certain criteria to be met to follow the equity method of accounting, and outside of Hoosier Energy and Hometown Energy, there's been no evaluation of whether or not that criteria is met. We're not saying that the accounting is necessarily incorrect or there's any issue with it. The evaluation just hasn't been performed. And like I said, every audit we do in this industry, we have that comment. So it's very common. We are required to include it. I will now go back to the front of the report here. So last time I'll bounce around on you like that. Page 3 is our independent auditors report. Catch up. And similar to the audit communications, this will be a clean report. It's in the accounting world, what's considered an unqualified opinion. And the report format has not changed from the prior year. If you flip over to the top of page 4, that unqualified opinion is the first sentence from that. In our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the organization. So again, that's as good as you can do on an audit opinion. It's not qualified. I'll just keep moving along unless anybody has any questions, that catches their attention. It's nice to be doing this in person first time in a while. Some of the Zoom meetings get a little bit awkward as you're talking about all these things and you can't really see anybody's reaction. Page 5 is your balance sheet. Typically, I'll make notes if I see any significant variances year over year. Nothing really caught my eye year over year. And I don't want to dwell too much on some of the numbers because I know this group looks at them on a monthly basis. These are a few months old at this point. Total assets have stayed fairly consistent year over year. They're about $56 million. Next page, you'll see liabilities and equities actually facing pages for you. Once again, no real significant changes year over year. The long-term debt has continued to pay down without any borrowings over fiscal year 21. It's dropped a little bit, but like I said, no real significant changes that caught my attention. Page 6 is your statements of revenue and expense. Profit world would be your income statement. Your operating revenues have remained consistent at around $34 million. And I'll skip to the end. The net margins have remained strong year over year, $2.5 million. The year before made the positive. Something catches anybody's attention. Page 7 is just your statement of equity, summarizes your equities year over year. The majority of the changes you'll see each year relate back to the margins as they get rolled up into the cooperative's equity totals. You'll see a little bit of retirement of capital, $500,000 that this group would have voted on sometime last year to repair a portion. Moving along to the statement of cash flows, I never like to get into a whole lot of detail, the numbers, ins and outs of the cash flows. I do like to point out the first subtotal, which is net cash provided by operating activities. It's usually a pretty good metric to look at. You know, at the top of the page, you start with your net margins of about $2.5 million this year. After you boil down all the ins and outs of receivables and payables, or anything that doesn't really represent cash but hits your bottom line, you get to about 3.6 million in the positive of cash provided by operations during the year. It's about 2.1 million positive in the prior year. So those, like I said, are good metrics. Sometimes the net margins and that cash provided by operations can paint two different pictures. So it's good to look at. I think in both these instances, you're producing cash by your operations. You do with the cash provided by operations. You used it for extension of replacement of plant, so about 2.2 million into building your plant, building your lines. And then you have under financing activity, large piece of that was used to continue to pay down debt.
Chris, on the statement of cash flows, I see a depreciation amortization number $1.5 million. And on the operating statement, I see depreciation of $1.470 with a $60,000 difference.
60,000 should be, you have some deferred charges there. I think we disclose exactly what including all those deferred charges are they're going to be subject to amortization. So that second should give you more detail, but you should have about the change in that number should be your amortization that's included in the cash. If anybody else has anything, feel free to stop me along the way. Beginning on page 9 are the disclosure of the financial statements, and page 9 and the top of page 11 summarize the significant accounting policies. I won't go into a lot of detail on these because, as I said in the opening audit communications, there have been no changes from the prior year accounting policies. So it's your basis of presentation, the fact that you have your plant that's subject to depreciation, that you recognize revenue as it's earned. But those are all the same policies that would have been in place here. No significant changes. At the middle of page 11, we go into the rest of the disclosures. We disclose the makeup of your electric plant totals of the $48 million or so. About 42 to 43 of it's your distribution plant, the remainder being your general plant, which is this building and things like that. Top of page 12, we disclose the makeup of your investment in associated organizations. The majority of that is your investment in Hoosier Energy of the about $17.5 million. About 16 of it relates to the Hoosier Energy investment. And then there are other investments as well. And those are the ones we're referring to in the internal control content. Internal control. Since Hoosier Energy is considered to be a significant component of the financial statements, we do summarize some of their information. So at the bottom of page 12, one of our standard disclosures is to summarize Hoosier Energy's totals as of December 31, which is the last time they had audited financials come in. We disclose total assets, equity, and net margins out of the financial statements we do. Page 13, we disclose that you're committed to purchase power from Hoosier Energy through 2050. That's been in there last year as well. We looked at those financials side by side. Your capital, the cooperative's capital is made up of assigned and assignable. So depending on where you are in the accounting cycle, assign margins, you assign all your capital to members. And just a matter of time when you have certain portions of that capital that has not been assigned yet to members. So as each accounting period closes, assign them out, you accumulate a new person each year. A little bit of other equity. Bottom of page 13, the majority of that's donated capital. That's permanent capital of the organization, meaning that's no longer assigned to members. Page 14 summarizes your long-term debt. And as I mentioned, it's continued to pay down. You have a little bit with RUS. The majority of it is with FFB. And you also have a few balances with CFC. As we're required to, we summarize the next 5 years of maturity of pay downs. Towards the bottom of page 14. If you have any line of credits available as an organization, we're required to disclose that as well. Disclose that you have a $4 million line of credit available to use balance on it at the end of either the last 2 years. The fact that you have it available, you note that. Pension plans on page 15. We have some disclosures surrounding the fact that you participate in the NRECA retirement plan. And the high points of this disclosure are the fact that you contributed about $293,000 in 21, about $272,000 in 2020 to that. I believe, question a minute ago about the amortization at the bottom of page 15, the first chart is here. And I thought that's what the majority of it was, but I wanted to make sure it was the NRECA prepayment. So at some point in time, looks like in 2013, we've had the opportunity to prepay NRECA in order to receive discounts in the future. That prepayment's been amortized over 10 years. So we get a piece of that this year included in there. Top of page 16, anytime an entity of any sort has major customers or any sort of concentrations or required to disclose that. This group has one major customer that accounts for over 20% of operating revenues, and we disclose on that as well as the portion of accounts receivable related to that one customer. Then finally, at the bottom or the middle of page 16 are our subsequent events. We don't have anything to disclose this year. But anytime anything changes between, in this case, May 31 of 21 and today, September 23rd, we'd be required to disclose that if there are any significant changes in operations, significant borrowings, purchases, other agreements that were entered into. Sometimes I struggle for examples, but unfortunately in 2020, as we were wrapping up 2019 audits, there's a prime example when COVID came about. Nobody really knew what the outcome of all that would be or how it would affect any sort of entity or business. It's a prime example of the type of things we would put in there, subsequent events. Having said all that, there isn't anything as of today that we're aware of that we think needs to be disclosed that affects the May 31, 2020 financials. No, that's a lot fairly quickly. Anybody has any questions or anything that caught their attention along the way there? Happy to answer any questions. Anything?
If you have any questions, or maybe we can go ahead and executive. It's probably a good time to do.
If somebody pops on, it's not going to be recorded. You let pop them off. So if you hear something, ding ding.
Thank you guys.
No.
All right, so just got through the audit report. I'm looking for a motion to approve it. Second,
I'll second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're good. We do have one other question, and I think Suzanne, if you don't mind, go ahead and read it up right now.
Sure, we talked about last year, it was the year, it was right before when Eric submitted his resignation. We talked about coinciding the audit year with the members' annual report and the tax return. And at the time, the prior auditor had informed us that we just had to do a short-term audit to finish out the year and then get our audit scheduled as soon as possible. And those were the only two things needed to get that, to have it on the calendar year to coincide with the 990 tax form. We have just found out that we actually, because of our US information required, we would have to go back and do prior even to 19 and do prior audits. So I was gonna request Matt, if you would do some information to find out what's involved with the 990 going from the calendar year to the May fiscal year. So it also coincides with the audit. Then we stay with our US requirements, not having to go back and do prior audits, just so the information we provide to our members and the information provided to the IRS and the information being audited is all on that May to May schedule.
So keep May as the audit.
As the May as the audit and change our 990 from the calendar year to the fiscal year, which would just require a short-term 990 to be reported the fiscal. And I know Eric had supported it the prior, and I know Brett said they've discussed it several times, that it makes sense if we could just put that on the same schedule.
I don't know what we all got to do, but I know that I'm pretty sure we can do it. The Form 7, I know we can, because of the reporting for the KRTAs, but I'm pretty sure the 990 we can. Matt will just make a phone call.
Just maybe to do some more investigating to see what we can do to get that going. So then we can
If I remember,
coincide with the schedule with them as they may.
Would we shift our budgeting process, everything then to May as well, so that everything coincide together? I mean, would that be the ultimate goal, to put everything on that as your year?
I would say the ultimate goal would have everything on the May, if we can't go calendar year, which per, the information provided to RUS, I think is just going to open up it's going to be more.
Be very costly to go to year end, plus
Yeah.
charges a lot
It's going
more.
to be a lot more substantial information than just a short-term audit as was suggested before.
Plus getting an auditor to come in for a December year end is a lot more expensive than getting an auditor to come in in the middle of the summer.
Whatever we can do to coincide everything to stay on the same, whether it's May, January to December, just what that entails.
Okay.
And Chris offered he'd be available for any questions or anything.
Okay.
And I think he's going to reach out to you, Brett, as well, to give you some information related to RUS.
And also on the negative side, Matt, if you find anything that, suggests that there's reasons why we shouldn't do that on your end, just if you would do some investigating to let us know. I can't think of any major negatives toward it.
The biggest thing would be as long as everything moved together. I would think the budget and everything and unless there's something missing there. I mean, moving everything to the same time, I think that would simplify things, wouldn't it?
I mean, you're still, the Form 7. Form 7 will not be, because that's
Can't
required.
move that no matter
You
what.
can't move that no matter what, but I mean, it's just a matter of putting numbers on a piece of paper when the time
the
comes.
Form 7, we can just back in. I mean, that's not really,
File it monthly. It's,
those are actions anyway, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, we got it.
Thank you.
All right, so are we good, Suzanne, with question? Okay. We'll just pause for a second. I think instead of starting on something else, Brian will be with us momentarily. And he'll be talking to us about broadband in Indiana. So in just a moment.
And would be contracts that way, then calendar year, not calendar year. From when the contract is signed. Those limits of contract entirely. Year from when it's signed. Right. You know, so I am kind of.
Standing where you want. You can do whatever you want. I'll introduce you here in a second. That's your. If you want to sit. Sure. Flop a seat there, or if you want to stand, you can just get here. Whatever works. We're waiting on one in the bathroom, so.
How are you?
good, how are you?
Good. Got some both about the bidding process, which different limits. Contract. Yes.
It will be.
3% of that.
I've done like 4 of these.
I have no.
And everyone's like,
I mean, it's a lot. It's big. Now, that year to year is probably gonna.
I didn't.
Maybe I'll,
You might have to.
It's nine. But once after the contract, and it rolls off of your limits.
I took a lot of backgrounds.
Did you? Okay.
So I'm kind of in. I looked at the Google Maps, so it's.
oh, yeah. Because we had our. Come back for tonight.
It was.
Harry.
I decided it was better off just to.
All right, so
Same
we'll go ahead and get started. Crystal actually participated in a conference, I don't know, a month ago or so. And Brian was there, and I'll introduce him here in a second. And she came to me and said, hey, I think it'd be a really good idea for the board to see this presentation and just kind of what's going on with broadband in Indiana. So Brian's probably a familiar face to most of us anyway, maybe not Clay, but for most of us, Brian's Vice President of Government Relations at IEC. IEC is our statewide. So Brian, go ahead and take it away, and thank you. We really appreciate you coming down.
I was gonna sit down till I realized I couldn't see the screens. I don't have it by memory, so we'll go this way. Let's see here. Perfect.
Say, if you want, I can,
No, fine. Stand up's
in
even,
case you do get it.
stand up's even better. I've done this enough. As Brett said, my name is Brian Christenberry, Government Relations Vice President. I've been with the statewide 10 years. It's amazing how time flies. I still don't have all the acronyms down and definitely won't get them all down anytime soon. So what we're going to talk about today really quick is just the broadband story. And the reason it's a story and the reason we're kind of discussing it in this manner is the fact that my wife's a first grade teacher. She tells me all the time that people learn better when it's told in the form of a story. She said when she talks to her first graders, she says once upon a time, and they kind of get a little bit excited. This is an exciting thing for us. And it's an exciting thing for us because it's not the same for everybody. Every co-op's a little different, so it's an intriguing story every time we tell it. Now, I don't feel bad blocking off over here because I think she's going to hear this exact same tale tomorrow. So we're going to go back a little bit. Everybody knows the background of the co-ops, electricity space. And I was actually at a presentation yesterday, and we talked about how back in the 30s, electricity was kind of a wow moment. It was a magical thing when you could light up a community. Over time, that's kind of gotten to the point where people just take it for granted. How many folks do you know just flip on the switch and they look at us as a utility, right? That tends to happen. The broadband space is a lot more of a wow moment. There's a lot more magic when you can light up high-speed internet in some of these communities. So as we talk a lot about back in 1935 with the REA Act, Indiana was the ground floor for a lot of what we're looking at in terms of being kind of the initial kind of starting point for a lot of these initiatives. Boone County being, one of the first here in the country. Indiana statewide, which used to be Indiana statewide, now is IEC, was the first statewide of its kind in the country. We take that heritage and history very seriously when it comes to being the first. So the face here is shaded because we don't want you to know who it is, okay? I don't know if you can tell, and I'm not going to name any names because it's a little bit, I don't want to do a little he said, she said, but this is a quote from an anonymous telecom executive, a large telecom in Indiana. And he was sitting we were at the 4-H fairgrounds in Hendricks County, and the lieutenant governor asked the question, why should we go into rural Indiana, or why shouldn't we? And this gentleman stood up and said, well, I know for a fact that people live in rural Indiana don't want it or need it. I don't think that's the right audience when you're dealing with the governor or the lieutenant governor. I think that's a pretty outlandish statement. I won't tell you what company is with. Maybe I'll tell you later offhand when we get out of here. Now, I used to do this presentation a lot, probably 4 or 5 years ago. And when we would talk to legislators back in 2017, the question that always came up was, what were the needs? What do you need broadband for? Why do you need high-speed internet? Can you remember back 4 or 5 years ago when you would sit there and think, well, why do I need it? Why is it a necessity? Because really, 2017, even prior, entertainment was kind of on the forefront of everybody's mind. It was Netflix, it was Hulu, it was if you want to FaceTime with grandkids, if you want to be able to have cable. Cable was just starting to run with high-speed fiber. Today, it's a litany of things, okay? How many of you have done a telehealth appointment online? It's very strange to open up your mouth on the camera and have someone see if you have strep throat or not. I don't know if it really works, but what we have found is that small towns across Indiana, across the country, are losing small doctors, losing rural doctors for one purpose. And the reason is to be part of a big medical group, you have to offer some of these virtual office hours. And if you can't do things virtually, you can't be a part of that system. So they're leaving town. We've always said at Indiana Electric Cooperative that it's not necessarily about just electricity. It's about the communities in which we serve. Our goal is to bolster and improve the communities in which we serve. So when you start looking at situations like healthcare, economic development, quality of life initiatives, you can run a multinational corporation from anywhere in the world. You can do it from just here in Decatur County if you like. So it's no longer an issue of, well, we need to go live in the big city to get this done. And we don't think you should have to move anywhere to raise your kids and to start your business. You should be able to live where you want to live, and you should be able to do what you want to do. Brain drain, it's a huge thing that we talk about at IEC. When kids graduate from college or vocational school, or maybe they go to the military and they come back, They want to say, well, exactly what do I have in my community? 20 years ago when I bought a house, the first question I asked was what? Who's my electricity provider? Who's my phone provider? Now the question is, do we have high-speed internet? It's just a question we ask now. And there's a lot of situations where you can't run your business if you don't have high-speed internet. The cliched story of taking your kids to McDonald's to download homework, it's a real thing. It's an absolute real thing. I live in the suburbs of Indianapolis. I live in Lawrence, Fort Bend area. I take it for granted because at the end of the day, my kids have iPads and they're connected and probably a little more technology than I'd like. Really wish it was a little bit more pad and paper. But it helps to be able to track things. The kids are always coming home and they're always saying, I got new tests, so we know where they're going. They literally show me the next 8 weeks of what they're going to study. I never had that. I don't think any of us ever had that. Okay, so quality of life is the main purpose of exactly what we're trying to push when we're trying to push the expansion of broadband. So how did we get to where we are? Because like I said, back in 2017, it was a huge uphill climb to try to convince people this was a big deal. Because broadband is what? It's expensive. Okay, we're talking huge amounts of money. So when you go to the legislature like we do and ask for that kind of those dollar amounts, first question they have is, well, what are we going to get back for it? What's the return? So 2017 was a good year. Why was it a good year? We go all the way back to 2017 because it was the start of kind of our slow climb to filling in a lot of gaps. Senate Rolled Act 376, the REMC Act. Who would have known? I talked to a group of new employees just yesterday at IEC, and I asked the question, how many of you have had your annual meetings? They all raised their hands. I said, how many of you had online voting, early voting? Most of them did. Most of them didn't realize that prior to some of these dates here, you couldn't do that. Prior to the REMC Act being updated, you couldn't do that. And why did we change that? Why did we go change the REMC Act to allow more engagement, more transparency? Well, we did it back then because people said they were having a hard time meeting quorums, right? They were having a hard time getting people to show up to an annual meeting. Not because they thought less of the co-op, but just they had more things pulling at their time. We'd like to say we were brilliant. We saw the pandemic coming, but that's not the case either. But imagine what would happen if you didn't have those tools at the ready when all of a sudden annual meetings were being canceled. So the REMC Act update was huge. I would say the Easement Act was equally as important. Now, the Easement Act, Senate Rolled Act 478, came from a comment that was made by Mark McKinney at Jackson REMC, the CEO at Jackson REMC. He asked the question, he said, we don't know where all our easements are. We have no idea. There's a lot of them. Some of them aren't even written down. If we have to go back and renegotiate every single one of these easements, and we potentially have people that say, wait a minute, I don't want you coming across my land, that could get costly. And that could be something that everybody's paying for. So what we did was we passed a bill, or we got a bill passed with the consent of Farm Bureau because we wanted to work with them. We in no way wanted to infringe on the rights of property owners. We got an easement act that allowed both data from, internet data to flow through the same line as your electricity. Because what state law said prior to that was it could only be electricity. It couldn't be actual data. Now, most of our co-ops, are looped with fiber. A lot of our co-ops have smart meters, smart grids. It's something that the co-ops are far beyond most investor-owned utilities. It's one of the little known facts that most legislators don't even know, is the fact that we are so far ahead in a lot of ways to the investor-owned utilities. And the funny thing was, is when we passed that bill, we also put a caveat that for the landowner, if your land decreases in value as a result of putting broadband on your property, we'd be more than happy to look at reimbursing you. But I think most people know broadband to your home or high-speed internet, at least crossing your line, is not going to decrease your property value. If anything, it's going to increase it. So that was something we did that was huge. I'll skip over the third one because that was more just a little thing we did for Wabash Valley Power in the north. But that number at the end is important, 620 to 7. During that year, 620 to 7 was the number of times that we had legislators supporting co-op initiatives, 620 times. Only 7 times did they vote against our bills. That's only done because the co-ops do such a wonderful job, because Decatur REMC does such a wonderful job with their relationships at the State House. It's a huge burden to be wearing the white hat at the State House, always doing the right thing, but the co-ops do. So at the end of the day, that number is not about me. It's not about my team. It's absolutely about people in this room and the relationships that you build. And that hasn't changed. I don't know what those 7 people were doing, but I think they were on the wrong side of history. All right, there's always a story behind the story, okay? Jackson County REMC, I've asked Mark McKinney if I can tell this story, and he said absolutely. We had a meeting in front of the legislature probably around 2017. And we sat in one of the big conference rooms. There was probably about maybe 100 people there. And the legislature asked, what can the state do to expand broadband? And you had the satellite folks stand up and say, if you can give us $800 million, we'll solve the problem for you. I might be able to find a solution for $800 million. The investor-owned utilities and Comcast and AT&T all stood up and said, let's have more panels. We need a couple more blue ribbon commissions. We need a couple more task forces. There was one gentleman that stood up and said, I'm going to solve it, and I'm going to solve it for my people. And that was Mark McKinney and Jackson REMC. He said, it's going to be costly. He said, but we've run the numbers. We've asked the folks. We've asked our members. This is what they want. And this is the beauty of a co-op. You ask your members, okay? You ask the members what they want, and they came back and said, this is what we want. This is what we need. And the great thing about rolling something out like this is the fact that it spreads like wildfire. It really does. Because what happens when you start offering a really great service that your neighbor passed on initially? He says, where'd you get that? Oh, we got it from Jackson County REMC. How much? Pretty good price. I didn't think I liked it. I love the sound of my voice. It's a little aggressive. Put their maps up on the overhead and said, here's where we're going to serve. The Comcast of the world said, how in the world can you do that? You're showing us exactly what your business model is going to be. And they said, we don't care because our goal is to do what our members need. And up until now, it didn't make financial sense, and we'll only do it if it makes financial sense. Since then, Jackson County has actually increased the speed of their project, offered higher speeds, done it quicker, but still charge the same amount. See, what a lot of cable companies and large telecoms are telling you is we can go do it and we'll charge you $250. Or we can get to your house, it's just going to charge you $175. But what we have here is we have co-ops that say, you know what, we're going to give you gig service, high speed service for $50. And in times like COVID and you need higher speeds, we're going to bump that up because we can do that. Because what do we need to do as co-ops? We need to keep the communities in which we serve vibrant and robust. Jackson is absolutely a success story. And the reason they're also a success story is they worked with other co-ops. 9 Star Connect up in Greenfield literally sent engineers down to work with Jackson. Sent back of the office folks to work with Jackson. Jackson had questions, they called 9 Star. Do you think Comcast and AT&T share services? Do you think they share experts? Absolutely not. That's why co-ops stand on the shoulders of giants. They just absolutely do. If it works one place, it could work somewhere else. But there's nobody forcing you to do it, which is nice too. So why cooperatives? We've talked about this. Standing on the shoulders of giants, we share. I mean, it's implicit in the name cooperative. Fiber already exists. Most co-ops are already looped in fiber. It's not something we have to go out there and reinvent the wheel. The business model naturally lends itself together. I had the president of Comcast ask me, how in the world can you pretend to think you can serve fiber to rural Indiana? Rural customers are tough to deal with. I don't know who he's talking to. Been doing this for 80 years. I mean, we are, if you want to talk about the originators of dealing with rural Indiana and rural customers and rural members, it's not Comcast. It by far is every single one of our 38 member cooperatives in the state. So our business model is absolutely there. And last but not least, definitely not least, rural community confidence. If your co-op's doing it, you tend to think it's being done for the right reasons. But that's a high burden. That's a high burden that every co-op has to maintain, right? The fact that we are unregulated utilities in the electric space is a high burden. It means we have to do things really the right way. Because guess what? They could come after us at any moment. They haven't, but they could. So we have to keep doing things absolutely in the right mode. So then the question comes up, why not cooperatives? It's cash, money. It's expensive. It's incredibly expensive. And it's not something that you can just say, well, we'll do a little bit here and a little bit there. You either have to go in, you have to go all in or not at all. The blessing about all of this is there's many ways to do it. You can partner with groups, you can partner with rural telecoms, you can partner with other co-ops. You can do fiber projects, you can do wireless projects, you can do combos of both. You can start one way and finish another. There's no way that's right or wrong. You just do what's right for everybody in your space. So the money thing's an issue. Now, the nice thing is that the government has finally come around and said, we need to get on that. Federal government as well. There looks to be probably close to $4 billion coming to the states in terms of broadband. Because what they finally realized is when you're talking infrastructure, you're not just talking roads, right? Why is Indiana rising to the challenge? Why are we doing even better than some other states? There's a lot of states currently, Kentucky being one of them, that up until this year, state statute didn't allow them to get into broadband. The next level connection agenda was started by our governor a couple years ago. It started out in a really kind of rocky way. They went and they looted the toll road fund up in northern Indiana. So if you live in northern Indiana, you probably didn't love it so much. They raised the amount of tolls on trucks, which what that did was it forced all those trucks, in order to avoid the higher tolls, they went on local roads that weren't set up to handle all that truck traffic. So it wasn't the dominoes didn't fall too great if you lived up in northern Indiana. But I'll be honest, what it did do is kind of start the process of saying every year we need to allocate some more money. And they've done that. Leadership from the governor, lieutenant governor, they've been great to work with. House and Senate leadership, the same thing. Folks in every neck of the woods, even out here, the Randy Fries of the world, the Randy Linuses of the world, all these people have stepped up and said broadband is essential. It's not a luxury anymore. There's not one thing you can really do and say I can do without. I had a conversation with Congressman Baird years ago when he was still in the House, and he said, I've been trying to get AT&T to bring fiber out to my barn for probably 10 years. He said, I get it at the house, I don't get it at the barn. He said, I run a small operation. I need as much connection as I can. I need as much connectivity as I can. The smaller we are, the more technology we almost need to use. So we don't have the benefit of large amounts of manpower. We've had $350 million in the budget since 2017, and that number should go up. We just finished a budget year last year. We have a short session next year, but there's always money in reserves. Now, the key is who gets the money.
Brian, is that 350 the next level stuff?
Yeah, 350 solely next level. There's a larger amount coming from the feds. Now, the problem is whenever the federal government releases cash, there's strings attached. And what do you think happens when there's a big pool of money? Everybody says, well, we can do it. So what you're running into now is you're getting a lot of technologies and companies that say they can do it, that really can't. And then there's no guardrails to protect. So they get the money, they sit on it for a couple of years, and then they say, well, guess what? We can't do it, so we'll just pay our officers with it. It's a problem we're running into. We're trying to get the money to where it needs to be used, which in our minds is us, small providers. So this is a great little map right here. It might not be too easy to see, but it shows you exactly where we came from. If you look back at 2015, there was only 2 co-ops that were involved in broadband heavily. You had 9 Star, which is one of, I think at the moment, there's still one of only 2 co-ops in the country that are both dual telecom and electric co-ops. But 9 Star and then also Johnson County. In 2021, as you can see there, exponentially a greater number of co-ops getting into it. And I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of co-ops in this map here that said back in 2015, I don't ever see it happening. If you look at where we were just a year ago, 12 out of 38 co-ops were active with broadband projects. In just 1 year, we increased that to 19. Almost double the amount of millions of dollars invested, almost double the amount of addresses served, and almost double the amount of miles of fiber stretched. So as we've talked here tonight, it is like wildfire. You do get co-ops doing it right. And then other co-ops that were a little concerned say, well, maybe we can do it. Boards looking at this saying, maybe we can get involved. No pressure, but maybe there's something we can do. Let's go talk to them. And this is all coming in response to what the members are asking for. I don't really see any co-ops doing top-down approaches where they're trying to force feed this down anybody's throat. This is something that we going to continue to see. I think as of now, every co-op has at least done a feasibility study to be able to figure out what the needs are. And maybe right now there's no need. And that's 100% okay, because that could change in 6 months. So, as I said earlier, we're telling a story here, and every story has a villain. It's a pretty ominous looking guy right here. So what are all the things standing in our way? Big telecom is huge. The Comcasts of the world, the AT&Ts of the world are definitely scared of what co-ops are doing. Because what co-ops are doing is getting closer and closer to their footprint. They're not actually getting in their territories, but they're getting closer and closer. And what happens when somebody, let's say, and I always use Jackson County, but if you live in Seymour, just outside of town, and you're getting a gig service for $50, and then you have a brother that lives in town and he's getting Comcast, he's paying $150. You're going to say, well, where do you get yours? The closer and closer we get to infiltrating those donuts of those big cities, they're getting scared because they realize that we are the provider of rural Indiana. And once we start getting into this process, it's going to get even harder. Deployment versus adoption. The other thing that we're running into is, what do you think politicians like to do when there's money available? They want to dole it out as entitlements to everybody they can. So what they're starting to do is saying COVID was such a problem, we need to start giving people money to pay their bills. The problem with that is this is one-time money right here. So what happens when the money's gone? Those people have gotten used to getting their bills paid. And then you come back with your handout and say, I need more money for my, is there a place for adoption? Yes. Is there a place to help people that need it? Absolutely. But it can't be unfunded mandates that you can never get back to. The COVID story was a problem for us last year. And the reason is that every legislator was desperately trying to figure out COVID and how they could help. So the problem we ran into last year was the Comcasts of the world were trying to sell the narrative that the reason that broadband's not in rural Indiana is because the co-ops are charging too much for their pole attachments. Now, I know what the stretch is and the spread is on pole attachment rates. I know who's the highest. I know who's the lowest. I know where Decatur is. I know exactly kind of the number of the highest number. But what we were hearing from the Comcasts of the world is, well, you guys could charge $100. I said, do we? Well, you could. And legislators were buying it. Legislators were saying, well, maybe that's the reason that Comcast won't, because they have to spend so much on pole attachments, they can't then take that money and invest it in broadband. So our response was, well, what if we gave you all these attachments for free? Would you agree to serve? Well, we won't charge you. This is hypothetical because I have no say. But I said, what if they didn't charge you a thing? Would you then go serve everybody in the footprint? They said, well, we can't promise that. Of course they can. But the COVID story was an easy sell. It was an easy sell at the time. But we're starting to get legislators coming back saying maybe that exactly wasn't the case, but it needs to play out, right? The large telecoms of the world said, we're going to start deploying in the next couple months. Well, it's been almost 6 months and we've seen very little movement. So the facts will bear out as we move on from there. So the bottom line here is that we just have to keep staying the course. The thing about broadband, as I said at the beginning, is it's absolutely case by case and there's no one perfect system. There just isn't. And you're going to hear everybody and their brother asking, well, why can't we get this and why can't we get that? If it doesn't make financial sense, it doesn't make financial sense. It's the one silver bullet that we have at the State House. At the State House, the question is always, well, can we just do one thing that suits everybody? And the answer is no, because no co-ops are the same. No co-ops demographics are the same. The membership's not the same. The leadership's not the same. The CEOs are not the same. Okay? So the next steps for us are to continue to try to get that money, to continue to try to get the state to invest in us, to continue to get that federal dollars flowing to the states, and make sure that the right people are getting that money. If you talk to folks like the Lieutenant Governor, she will affirmatively answer that co-ops are the answer when it comes to this. Because we're lean, we're nimble, we're not looking to make profits off this, we're returning money back to the members, we're reinvesting money back in the system. We're not looking to send money to Charlotte, we're not looking to send money to Houston. And it is an expensive endeavor. So if you're looking to make money on this project, you're probably not going to want to do it. And it's going to get sooner and sooner that we're going to find more and more investor-owned utilities that say, look, just throw up their hands and say, we can't do it. Because for the last 40 years, they've been saying, just wait. It's coming. It'll be here. And that's been going on for like 20, 25 years. So the bottom line is that this is an ever-evolving thing. At the State House, we probably talk now electricity issues, maybe it's probably 50-50 now. Where we used to do solely electricity issues, now we're doing both. Because this is the question you get from the legislator, because when they go to their third house, this is what they hear. So are there any questions?
Brian, isn't there some legislators working on this poll contact issue? Now, that's not been resolved yet.
Right now, what we did with the poll contacts was they came to us and said, what we need consistency. So we want everybody to be on the same kind of rate. We said, that's not something that's going to work for us. And they said, well, what we want you to do is be on the FCC rate. We want you to be tied to what the FCC says the investor owners have to do. We said, we don't want to be tied to anything the federal government's got going on. We want it to be our own thing. Because in years past, when co-ops would maybe charge too much, I can think of Jackson County and Kankakee Valley actually had cases where they were charging what the state thought was a little too much. And those members brought that to the IURC and they actually figured it out and they came up with their own little rate. But the funny thing is there is no consistency. I mean, you could see $6 per contact all the way up to $48 per contact. But it was done kind of at the benefit of the co-op. So what they came back with was they looked at it and said, well, we need one unified rate and we need to do it based on the attaching percentage. So the percentage of the poll in which you can attach to is what you're going to be responsible for. And the number was 12.5. We came back and said, how about 18? They came back and said, how about 12.5? We talked to legislators over and over again and they said, look, you're not going to win on this. What else can we do to soften the blow a bit? What we did do in that language was we were able to get language in the bill that would actually penalize illegal attachments. So we were able to say, because up until now, there was no language that would actually call out illegal attachments. If you talk to most legislators, they don't even know what that means. They're like, what do you mean illegal attachments? They don't tell you that they attach to your polls? I said, absolutely not. And they said, well, what's the ramifications of that? I said, well, there's a power outage and our guys have to go fix it or have to go, attach to, have to get on that pole and they see things they don't recognize. That's a safety issue. Overburdening our poles without us knowing who to contact. We need to move infrastructure. Who do we call? They said that's a huge deal. We're not sure how we can enforce that yet. We just wanted to get it on the books. The other thing is we established this rate without it being tied to the FCC rate. So we've gone back to those same legislators, Chairman Cook in the Senate, Chairman Soliday in the House, and said, look, you need to give us some relief. And they said, we do realize that we probably went too far. So let's see how we can kind of dial that back.
So there hasn't been anything said yet.
Well,
Wasn't it down like $6?
it would be $6, depending on, they wanted it somewhere in the vicinity. If you looked at the FCC rate, it would be somewhere in the $6 range. And if you ran the numbers per co-op, it just depended on kind of where you were. Actually, the new 12.5 attachers percentage actually was going to make some co-ops go up. I know some of the southern co-ops actually were going to see their attachment rates go up. Now, it grandfathered in all existing contracts. So the good thing there is there weren't a lot of folks that were up for renewals, for renegotiations. And the hope is we can get back in there January and get something going that's going to retroactively fix the problem.
That's where we're at right now.
That's kind of that. So if you haven't, here's the thing too, is that there's groups like AT&T and some of these other groups that would prefer to be able to make different deals with different providers. They like the fact that they can come in and negotiate different things. They don't like one uniform rate. This was primarily a Comcast and a rural telecom kind of push. Charter's making this push in other states. Charter is actually going after make-ready costs in other states. They're trying to get it so they would lower the make-ready to I think it's, $100 a poll. How great is that, right? $100 a poll, flat rate, that's it. Okay, well, that's wonderful. And then they came up with the idea of let's have a fund that the state would administer, that large telecoms can go get money from this fund to help pay for make-ready for whatever you're charging. And we said, well, that's all well and good, but how would you work the system? They said, well, the co-ops would have to flip the bill and then they would have to go to the fund to get reimbursed. So, well, that's not going to work. So there's all these ways that they're trying to attack it. But the bottom line is that there is no uniformity because there can't be. Land polls in southern Indiana is a lot different than doing it in Kankakee Valley. And it's just not something you can get, you can get in our way and try and say, prescribe any one thing. So I would say that the pole attachment issue, the underground issue, we have some underground issues that we're trying to work through, trying to make it a little bit more flexible to go underground if you need to, trying to get that done too. Last year was so weird, we couldn't meet with legislators. Everything was Zoom. So everything was exactly as convoluted as that just was 5 minutes ago, right? You had to get online. You couldn't get, face to face. You couldn't touch the people. So we're hoping all that's past us. They say the State House can be completely open next session. So I think that's hopefully where we're going to be.
I think I'd like to point out that communications has no strict service territory like electricity does. They basically, and that's one reason why I think maybe some of the big guys are getting scared, because if we were to start something, we could go into the city of Greensburg if we wanted to.
Sure.
They couldn't legally stop us from doing that.
That's right. Their biggest pushback is they're concerned that they don't want state money. They don't want state money to go compete with their private dollars, which, okay, I can understand it. You've invested 20, 30 years in this, and all of a sudden you're getting state dollars to subsidize a challenge. Fine. But that's why in this next level fund, there are caveats that say private dollars get spent when you're going into competing districts. So if you want to go into Greensburg, you want to go into any Seymour, Brownstown, anything, and you want to compete with a Comcast, you can do that with private dollars, which is easily done. I mean, so these are all red herrings that they throw out there and say, well, this isn't fair. And, nobody was really concerned with footprints and things when we were dealing with service territory, 5 years ago. It was just kind of it was a free for all. So, but that's definitely, they get nervous. And so even when we say we'll stay out of your kind of sweet spot, they know that that's only for a short time. It really is. Anything else? Like always, any questions that you might not have right now, but you want to reach out at some point, let me know. Or let Brett know and he'll let me know. I'm constantly doing talks like this and talking to folks. The best ideas don't come from us, they come from you. I mean, I can take the last 5 successes we've had at the State House, and they weren't our ideas. They came from the co-ops. So we are completely open to anything that you want us to do, get done. If there's local things that get done in terms of like working with the governor's office or Department of Revenue, or you're having a hard time talking to the VA, we can do that too. We're here to help. But thanks for having me. As long as I took country roads and I stayed off 74, it was a nice trip.
Yeah, it's kind of a mess out there.
How long is that supposed to take? I mean, is this any? I'm asking community leaders here. I'm hoping to get some insight. How much longer when they take the
Years.
Now it sounds like we're in Indianapolis, right? 465 has been under construction for at least 5 years.
Brian, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. How much longer do you guys have to go?
10 minutes.
No.
We wish.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brett.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. So I think we will go ahead and have some discussion. Kind of what we've just heard. Actually, can we just hit that item and for your information on the broadband feasibility? Let's just go directly to, under for your information, the fiber proposal.
So that was just, by the way, that was not necessarily a proposal from us. That was something that they gave us as, this is what you typically get in a fiber feasibility study. So a couple of questions I've got from some different directors that I'll just share with everyone. That feasibility study does include competitor analysis. That's a big piece of it, is trying to figure out like what that who is in your area, what are they providing, what's their prices look like. That is all included in what a feasibility study would look like. A couple of things that I've heard from the other folks in the state of Indiana that are doing this that you don't think about as far as fiber when we talk about broadband. Number one is it does and it can provide non-member revenue, which can be used. I mean, that was one thing we heard on in one of the conferences, is that fact that you can create, if we go do fiber it can, we would pick up non-members potentially, and that non-member revenue could go into our electric business. And there's actually been co-ops that have been able to actually reduce rates, their electric rates based upon that non-member revenue. A couple other things, the advantages, from a electric business standpoint, communications is huge, right? So we've got these AMI things, we're using Powerline right now. Once we get to the fact of you got these smart homes coming out, if you do broadband project, you have the ability to basically hook up meters to broadband. That's a big deal. Smart grid technology, as you heard him talk about, that is huge, and you need communication to be able to do that. Metering, I talked about. The other couple different things is you do get, the electric business does get, a benefit from the fact that you can't just hang fiber on every pole, right? Some poles are going to need to be replaced. So the electric business does get the benefit of a fiber project because you're going to get plant that gets updated. And then one thing we were kind of talking about out in the hallway that these guys heard in the conference today is there's EV cars are coming, right? And of course, the question of when is always out there, and everybody's got their own opinion. GM is stating in 2035 they will not be producing any more internal combustion engines. EV is coming, and to be able to control those devices could be huge, right? It could be a big savings to not have to update. They're saying right now beneficial electrification and EVs can consider about a 40% increase in demand in the next 20 years. That's a hell of a lot of update to our plant if we need to account for that. If you have communications and you have smart grids and you can hook up chargers to fiber, you're able to control those to, in other words, maybe take them off peak, shut one down, but you can talk back and forth. So those are some of the things that I've heard. I can also tell you that in Jackson's case and in SCI's, their initial take rates were around the 40%. And they're seeing upper 70s to 80% take rates. So even their business cases at 40% made sense. And now it's like, wow, they're really getting the take rates that are way up there. So those are the benefits of fiber over, a wireless technology. You also don't have to worry about, speeds for fiber are, much faster. But then you got the cost. I've always been told that the cost for fiber is that upfront cost, whereas in wireless, it's a lot cheaper to do upfront, but once you look at long-term, it gets expensive. So those are some of the things I've learned and some of the communications I've had with folks on it. My recommendation, and I think staff's recommendation really is to have that data done, have that feasibility study done. I'm getting at least a phone call every other day as I participate in events over the weekends. That's all people talk to me about is when are you guys doing fiber? Great Plains has eliminated their wireless service to a lot of members. And my problem right now is we don't have the data to be able to say it can be done, it can't be done, or it can be done. And this feasibility study, I believe, would be the answer to, we may get it back and we may not be able to do it. Or we may see that it's something that we do want to do. But the first step in really understanding it, I think, is a feasibility study. So our recommendation was to do the feasibility and to approve those dollars.
So even if you get the feasibility study done and everything's a go, how long does it take to get everything rolling?
Years. You're still talking. So it's going to take us and I haven't got a quote on this, and it may be even worse now, but it's usually a 3-month to 4-month to do the feasibility. And then now you're talking about, okay, let's say it comes back. You're not going to be able to make a decision on a potentially $40-50 million project in a couple of months. So I'm saying, a year, even if everything looks good, and then, you got to put in place, who are we going to have do it? How are we going to? So yeah, you're a couple of years out for sure. There's no way it can get done much quicker.
Okay.
It's a long-term solution.
The only reason, with you getting plenty of phone calls and just people asking about the internet, what are we gonna do here with Great Plains? Now we ain't got nothing.
Yeah.
So I was trying to figure out how quick something could get done from a fiber standpoint and what's the other options from a quicker.
Yeah, and Clay, to answer your question a little bit, a lot of, and again, if this is something that we wanted to do, a lot of the folks are doing kind of a phased approach, right? So there are certain areas that are a lot quicker, right? That we could actually implement a lot quicker. There are certain areas because of terrain and other factors that would take a lot longer. You also need to look at density. I mean, you're not going to be able to go to those folks that are, one or two folks per mile line first. You're going to have to mix it in with some denser population. But I do think you could get people online, not everyone, but you would phase it basically. And I can tell you, Johnson County actually did something really cool. They're doing a fiber project. They've already done feasibility. They're doing a fiber project. They have a website, and I'll send you guys all the website, but they allow community members to get on the website and say, hey, I'm interested, right? And they would consider you as, if you sign up, you're a champion. So what your job as a champion is to go to your neighboring people and say, hey, we want you to get on the website and show your interest. And then what they do is, based upon the data that comes back, that's how they plan their project, right? So that the areas where there's a high take rate, they'll start. And then they don't even commit to the areas until the community themselves, the people themselves actually get on there and get it up to where the take rate's acceptable. And to piggyback on what Brian was talking about too, is the reason I think folks are going to be looking at us is because our business model for something like this, it worked for electric, right? We have to collect enough money to keep the service and the reliability up. We don't need a 3 to 5 year payback. And most telcos, if it's not a 3-year payback, I do it. And unfortunately for our territory, you're not going to get that.
So Clay, based upon your question, would you be a proponent of thinking about doing a feasibility study?
I'm looking at the other, what options do we got? That's what I'm curious of. And my thing is, what are the options that, from our standpoint, from the REMC standpoint, to get everything?
To do fiber or to
Any type of the.
I mean, we've been working with Watch. They're rolling out some stuff, obviously. We really haven't even looked at partnerships because we really don't have the data from a feasibility to even have those discussions. We can't even, you can't qualify for next level unless you partner with somebody that's done some type of feasibility or you've done feasibility yourself. So, and we know the federal government is getting ready to do this infrastructure plan, which has billions with a B in it for fiber. And if you don't have a feasibility study, you can't even bake in any of those dollars. So I don't know if I'm answering your question at all.
You're fine.
Can we partner with Watch?
If we think that wireless is, you miss out on all this stuff that I was talking about, but yeah, I mean, that's an opportunity. If you think wireless is the route to go and you don't want to, do some of these things I talked about.
Where do we stand with fulfilling the MOU memorandum?
But they have not asked us for one thing on the MOU.
So are we communicating with them?
I've sent a couple of emails, but they have not communicated with us whatsoever.
Do you have a direct contact with Watch?
I do.
Could they do a presentation just like IEC did regarding broadband, just out of curiosity, plus the short-term fix that would be versus long-term?
Yeah, we could ask them.
We can't, I'm not saying no to broadband, but if Watch, is a short-term to some of our members that are feasible to them.
Yeah. Yeah, we were here. I mean, we signed the MOU for them to, we told them we'd provide member data. We would provide some marketing. We could put them on our website. And they haven't asked for any of it. I mean, they haven't even came to us. And I think, Suzanne, the reason why is because when COVID hit, they couldn't keep up with the amount of people that were joining. And so they didn't want to market it because they already had their backlog full. So maybe that'll change things. I know some of the projects have fall off that they talked about doing. I know there's a lot of members that have called us and we've said, well, we got Viasat. We also have this watch. They said, yeah, we've already contacted Watch. We can't get service from them. Sure, you could build some more towers and stuff like that, but wireless technology, if you go ahead and do research on it, that's a limitation. And you also don't get any of this other stuff that, like the non-member revenue, the communications to our meters. You don't get any of that.
On the business side, as a consumer, I have yet to hear one negative comment regarding Watch for the individuals.
That's good. And it's brand
I know a
new.
lot of individuals that have it. I'm just saying a short term for those that have feasibility to Watch. Not saying no to broadband, but Watch is we can get a communication or a partnership with them, month, 2 months out versus 2-3 years out.
Yeah. Yep.
So is this proposal just an example? This is not a proposal for us
Correct.
to study.
Correct. This is just
If we would entertain doing a feasibility study, I assume that we're going to bid this out, get a couple, 2 or 3.
bid to like calls. Yes. There's about 4 really highly recommended ones that folks in the state of Indiana have used. So yes, you would definitely bid it out.
Do you have approximate cost on those?
Around 25.
This one's.
That's what
25 something.
Here.
I've heard anywhere from 20 to 25, depending on what we want to do.
So does it cost anything to get the quotes?
No, we can do that.
If we get the quotes and we have Watch come next month to do a presentation, again, for short-term, long-term?
Because, excuse me, I just want to make sure, because we're not signing a contract with Watch, it's just or a feasibility, we're not signing any type of contract. So those that are able to get Watch that we can push to get more
Correct.
quicker, and then do the broadband for the ones that are in the areas that are just not going to have the feasibility to have Watch because of the areas they live.
The only hiccup could be there is if you're referring all these folks to Watch, you're potentially eroding your business case in the broadband space. That's the only thing.
It's not spending 50 million.
Yeah, I get it. It's
But I
not an
think
easy thing.
I think the feasibility.
I think there's a happy medium is what I
I do
think.
too. And then,
Yeah,
if say
but I-
Watch in 10 years from now is no longer effective, the broadband's capable, then we have those individuals, but
The problem is I can't answer any of your questions because we don't have a feasibility.
Yeah, I think that's going to help answer those questions.
Chris, look, from a time standpoint,
That's okay.
I'm looking at them. I don't need internet for 2 years. I need it in 2
Wow.
months. And what's my next thing? Like between a business and the kids in school getting everything, and I could care less about Hulu and Netflix. I need internet to run a business.
Yep.
So that's where I'm in, like, the feasibility study is one thing, find out what the heck's going on here. And in the meantime, we got a short-term fix that's reliable to get us going. That's,
Chris, can you speak a little bit to the value of wire to the subs?
Yes. So the substations, we have equipment in the substations that give us plenty of data. Load data, any type of data we need at the substation. Fiber to the subs would help us be able to control our equipment in the substations. We'd be able to go out from the subs then to equipment on the lines and get all that data. We'd also be able to potentially team up with the AMI and bring that data back a lot quicker. People on prepaid would then be able to see their data almost live, as, depending on
I
what's.
know there are a lot of co-ops. That was kind of the baby step.
Yes,
Get a backbone to the subs and start there. If we hit a
Yes.
few people on the way, great. If Watch or someone else wants to provide something in an intermediate time frame, great, hook on. But I can't answer members' questions and say, well, I think broadband's too expensive. I don't think we can afford. That's my opinion. I don't know that until we have a study I think that you guys should go out and solicit 3 bids for a feasibility study and bring them back to us.
I would ask, is it, if we do offer a service or something, do we have to be the content provider? Or can we just provide the fiber and somebody else, like Jackson or whoever, Southeastern,
Yeah, you can.
would actually have the connection to the World Wide Web?
Yes, to answer your question.
Today at our training, the gentleman from SCI, and he said we could say this, he said his comment, he said to all the accounting people there today, he said, whatever, he said, maybe broadband doesn't work for you, but he said you need to find money to put it to your substations, because he said it will open doors you do not know exist.
Well,
And that was his advice to the accounting people was, you need to do at least this and then see where you get.
I can tell you that our neighbors have already said something to me about if they would provide it to our members.
And Clay, back to your,
Why wouldn't we? I mean, I think we need to do the feasibility and see if we can serve.
back to your point of like, we need something now, we need something now. That's the exact same thing we were saying 3 years ago. So we'd be putting fiber in the ground by now. It's like, I don't want to just keep saying, you know, fiber's our long-term solution, but we got to find all these short-term things too. I mean, if fiber's it, let's, you know, let's get, and I have no idea. Honestly, I'm sort of in the bank that I think a lot of us are is, how is that going to work financially? I don't know. It's working at all these other places that are doing it.
I think it's very interesting that we're not restricted to our I did not realize that.
Yes.
I think that's very interesting that, you know,
That's,
we can tap into Greensburg, who was on Duke, an individual as a consumer. I did not realize that.
I mean, one option I would want to look at feasibility is serving every town around us. Not just our territory. I mean,
I think that's
now
interesting.
you've got all these member revenues. I mean, think of the revenues that are coming in that would be non-member revenues that, you know, could have a different rate structure. You know, I don't know. You heard like Jackson County and these guys, they're providing it for
But they definitely should be paying more than RMC members, not just.
But I mean, $50 for a gig, you're not getting that for wireless. That's cheap.
What percent of their membership that has broadband in Jackson County is not the regular?
I don't know. I could get that.
It's not critical, but you know it's gonna.
Are you pretty familiar with the Jackson CEO?
Yes.
So if we have general questions, not all of us bombarding him, that we can go through you and say, could you ask just as a
He
question?
actually told me, he's going to be here Wednesday. He told me he would be more than happy to come anytime you guys wanted him to come and just have conversation.
Or we may want to email you to just out of curiosity.
It's gonna be Wednesday forward.
He's coming here Wednesday for our general
Oh, okay.
meeting. But he would be more than happy, if you guys want to get questions together. Mark has told me numerous times that I can meet with your board anytime you want.
Do we need to get a motion to get quotes?
It wouldn't be a bad idea. Yeah, let's.
Yep.
So I need a motion to.
I'll make the motion to get 3 quotes. Is that what you wanted, Jason?
Yep, that'd be great.
We'll get as many as we can, but
I'll second.
At least 3.
Motion. Please second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Right. Chris. Actually, I was gonna do the.
it don't matter.
I thought we'd go ahead, just remove that. I thought we'd go ahead and do the for information.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, so we'll go ahead and incorporate the rest of for your information. Now. So does anybody have any question from?
You're talking about the whole segment for you.
I am, yeah. Kind of honed in just on the proposal, but now I'm opening it up to the entire for your information.
I have Matt, I have a question for you on, you're supposed to get a list of pros and cons for each financial lender. And this kind of came up earlier tonight. We were talking with the auditor about RUF. And, you know, obviously there are more requirements with RUS, but they're also connected to FFB. So I guess, are we close to getting that? And is there going to be some, that's what I really want to know, is FFB and RUS, are we operating on the same?
They're the same thing.
It's the same, but are they both requiring the same things from us?
Correct. They are. FFB is basically RUS.
Well, they guarantee the RUS loans.
Yes.
I don't know.
But you are every requirement that we have to meet for FFB which I will tell you, we just got notice 3 days ago, maybe. They are starting to streamline the process. One of them, and there's some stuff in there that's going to be big, like things like you don't have to amend when you do a construction work plan project over time, because it's a 5-year work plan, over time, those project priorities are going to change, right? And you always had to amend it, do environmental, do all these things that, it's hard to put a dollar value on because it's Chris's time, Pat's time. But that's an example of they're not requiring that anymore. They're saying basically, you do your construction work plan at the beginning, that justifies the funds. If you change it, you change it. Not the total dollar amount, but the projects within. So they're streamlining that process is why I'm bringing it up. I did send Matt the initial list that Eric and I worked on, but I think I just sent it to him literally last week. So he was going to get that put together. I think we think we can have that probably pretty easy by going next week. Yeah.
And you were wanting the differences between.
Well, I just want some clarity on that because when we talked earlier, if we pay, just being what said, if we pay off the RUS, then we don't have to follow X restriction. But I'm not sure that it's entirely true based on what you're telling me.
And that was a question I had because that's what we wanted to know. If it's RUS or both.
But I think it's
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
I will say that if we do buy out of RUS, we sell enough kilowatt hours that we would have to follow the Fricker County rules. We wouldn't, so there would be a mostly similar set of rules that we'd have to abide by from the federal government.
But they're changing those and they're streamlining them. Because that's been the big push is a lot of folks are moving from FFBRUS to CoBank and CFC because there's a lot less work and restrictions. But FFB and RUS continue to streamline and not require stuff. It could be close.
Their interest rates are cheaper, but you do a lot more work to get the lower interest rate. It's.
And it's hard. It's hard, Clay. You smile. It's like, it's hard for us to be able to there's so much paperwork. And so, it literally took us 1.5 years to do the plan. There's just so much that's in getting the plan approved. So I get it, but it's really, really hard to justify, okay, how much did that cost compared to the pretty substantial difference in interest rates?
So several of the other co-ops nearby us, they've made the decision that the paperwork burden is so great that it's still cheaper to go with CFC.
I will say though that the paperwork burden, as far as creating a work plan, that's all capitalizable over the course of that work plan.
Yeah.
So any engineering knowledge you spend.
I'm just saying
That's right
from
back, yeah.
the standpoint of they feel like it's, plus the amount of time it takes is how they've described it to me when I've asked them, so.
And some of those requirements are actually good to follow whether you're required to or not.
Yeah.
So we would have to figure out which ones in that,
But it's just like the IURC, just because you don't fall under the jurisdiction of IRUC doesn't mean that their rules are.
I think they all have pros and cons. I mean, there's people borrow from every one of them for a reason.
And that's why you're going to work on a list, right?
I get a general idea, but I'll put something that you can look at, yeah.
Anything else for your information?
Steve, I want clarity on the closed action items. Last month, we spent a fair amount of time, Jeff, on your contention of $700,000 being missed. My recollection was that I think maybe the next day after our short meeting, you were going to meet with Brett and with Matt to get that resolved. I see it on the closed action items, but I just want clarity. That is a closed item. Is that correct?
No, I agree to disagree. I'm moving forward, focusing my experience on providing fair and equitable rates for all members on the next cost of service study. Steve, if there are other questions, if you would put them in writing, I'll be glad to respond to them.
I'm not sure where you're.
If there are other questions concerning this, please put them in writing and I'll be glad to respond.
This is what the open session's for.
Right, but I That's where I'm standing with this. So no, anyhow, I've made my statement.
So you don't want,
So in your mind, it's not closed, is that?
No, it is not. But I'm moving forward.
And I understand
The
that.
next cost of service study.
So you're saying there's no resolution until the next cost of service study? Is that what you're telling us?
That's where I'm at, yes.
so then it definitely can't be considered a closed action item, is that right? Is that what I'm hearing? It can't be categorized as closed if Jeff still has concerns. And while I appreciate him setting it aside, I'm more inclined to say, what do we do to fix it? How do we?
I think part of that can be discussed in executive session.
Well, at the very least, it needs to be moved from the closed action items, I think, in my mind.
Still open?
Well, obviously Jeff's he doesn't have the satisfaction that he wants.
What do we need to provide? What else? So this,
If you would, if there's a list of questions.
That's kind of what
provide them and I'll.
trying to find out. And I think, I heard what you said, Jeff. I mean, if we can discuss it in executive session,
I think that would be best.
if we have to,
I think it would be
then
best.
we'll see what we can do. But I heard what,
I'm fine with leaving it open.
it's still open.
I mean, discussing it in executive session.
The rest of the board, we okay with talking about it in executive session? Right.
There's something productive to talk about, yeah.
Anything else for your information? All right, I think we're now to the 2022. Richard. So, Chris, let me get it. Okay. Good.
Well, thank you, Brett. So we're basically looking over the projects that we want to design and build for 2022, as well as design for 2023. And what we found out over the past couple of years is that we always seem to be up against our end of the year deadlines, getting the dollars on the books, getting the work orders closed, getting, making sure that everything's financially right with your expectations of margins at the end of the year or throughout the year even. So we see that it affects, the cash flow projections, the margin projections, and then to kind of go through what we see, but backwards. In order to get the financials in place, the work order's got to be closed. That happens after, of course, the construction is done, which happens after we get materials, which happens after we get a contractor to do the work, which happens after we get the contract with the contractor signed, which happens after we send out bids, which happens after the job is designed, which happens after the design contractor is, hired. And then all that happens after y'all approve the budget for the following year. So you can see that we're already kind of playing with a lot of time in between when the budget is approved and when we can actually start construction. So those are our big problems. And what we see this year, we presented the last budget for 2021 in December. You guys approved it in December, which it's like only a week or two later, I think, something like that. It wasn't a long time in between. All right, thank you. And we went into contract negotiations with PSE. When we signed a contract with them in late March, it took about a month to start field work because of the weather. And then by the time June 23rd rolled around, they had everything ready for the pole replacements. And that's when they released the request for proposals. We got two bids back in July 9th. We determined the winner July 21st. And the contractor that we chose has since been coordinating with their laydown yard, the materials, any equipment they need, crews they need, and they're actually going to be starting here next week. It's taken them some delay based on getting materials. We have 2 other projects that were bid out that we're seeing a similar issue. And one project that we had that has not yet been bid out, we're seeking input from NDOT for crossing the bypass here. And, you know, if they wouldn't approve a permit, then we'd have to redesign, and you don't want to do that after you hire a contractor. So we're trying to go about that in a proper way. So what we're looking at for a couple solutions here, is that we're seeking to authorize the dollars for construction of our work plan projects ahead of our normal budget process. Again, this is just for the construction piece, not all the services and anything else that we'd normally approve. What we are looking for is that it's going to allow us to design stuff sooner, allow us to order materials sooner, allow us to send bids out sooner, and then hopefully everything will be constructed, built by the time end of the year rolls around. One of the things we see with contractors right now is right now in September, they're putting together their calendar years for the following year. So if they already have them filled up with the pole replacements, we sent to 10 different companies. We only had 2 responses back. The more contractors we can get to bite, the better off we're going to be. And so the other thing that we're looking for as a solution is that we're seeking authorization for dollars to design projects getting ahead of the game for 2023, so that we would have those designed in 2022. It gives us a little buffer so that if something needs to be shifted in the schedule, in the work schedule, that we can move stuff around a little bit. If our crews, if we don't have any more, if new services, service upgrades, if all that stuff dries up, we still have work ready that our crews can do. If we have a line that we know in advance that we're going to reconductor this line, and when we get a new service or something off that line, we can kind of plan our work accordingly. And so we don't build something that we're going to have to take right back out as we have 2 different projects in that same area. And then we can also look at maintenance work like tree trimming. Why trim the trees on a line that you're going to move out to the right of way, out to the road? So we can possibly save some dollars in that as well. So what you see here is, it is kind of a busy slide. The projects at the top under distribution work plan projects, every single one of these outside of the design work is from our 4-year construction work plan. What you see below is our pole replacements. Pole replacements are what's considered what's the word I'm looking for, Brett?
I have no idea.
We can't control them. They're not controllable. We don't know how many in an individual year we're going to have until the poles are tested. The ones up top are controllable. We control the schedule on that to a degree, but we're choosing which projects to actually build. What's highlighted in the budget column add up to the bolded number above it. That's CWP 201-1. That's the project that we haven't bid out yet this year. So that's not included in the sum total. But I wanted to show it so you guys knew what was going on, because we still plan on finishing it. It just not by the end of the year, what it looks like. So this 314-6, that's an industrial member primary metering. We want to redesign and replace the overhead risers and the metering, primary metering to a underground pad mount cabinet. And the big reason why is safety. Right now, there's like 4 different risers on one pole. Doesn't give the line crew a lot of working space or climbing space. It's not really accessible. It's easy to get hurt, or what they would actually do is take the whole plant out of power for however long it takes to fix whatever it is. So that's the second thing, is that it's a little bit of on the reliability end as well. The 305-1 job, that is replacing underground conductor outside of the building here, 2 main feeders that are well past the end of life. There's a bare neutral on that, which is probably corroded in the ground, which means a dangerous situation for anybody having to work on it.
That line was put in 1979. It's the big lines that go out underground from all the way substation up to the road.
And on one of those feeders, there's 235 members, and the other one would be basically used to serve print pack over there, and we're looking at redoing that to help break up the load on what is currently serving that industrial area. The 308-4 is feeder exits coming out of the Westport sub. That particular area, 3 feeders come out to a jumbled up mess, really. Well, I'm sorry, but that's what it is. I mean, we've got switches there that cannot be operated. We have a broken arm on one of the poles that, in order to fix, we'd have to take 2 of the 3 feeders out of service completely. And we're proposing to do something a little bit different there to make it easier for the crews to work, make it safer, make it more reliable. And then that 608, that is a bucket, H conductor, AJCSR, and copper weld conductor. They've generally weakened over the years. Safety issue, if it breaks, it stretches easily, And again, that's a bucket of many potential projects. So those are not individually listed. There are items that as priorities change, maybe the dollar amounts we see that we can spend or something changes, that we can move certain ones in and out. Be a little flexible on that end. And then the design work is the stuff for 2022 that you see on the other side. I'm not going to go through those projects individually at the moment, but basically you can just see that, we're trying to get ahead of the design work so that when 2023 rolls around, we can hit the ground running and get contractors and get stuff going. Pole replacements in the 2021 budget, see that almost $1.5 million, and you'll see a big difference to 2022 budget. The issue there was in 2021, we budgeted for multiple years worth of rejected poles. And 2022, we're expecting just the 2021 inspected rejected poles. And we do have those figures in terms of what the poles, how many poles. There's about 164 of them. We know what's on them. So what we did on the left side here, there's 53 face poles. There's 2 two-face poles. You can read through the rest of that, but know that where that $490,000 comes from is knowing what's on the poles, putting those construction units into our system, into our work order system, and it basically gives us the cost based on our average costs, and basically it's our estimating system. So as opposed to last year where we started out with $1 per pole assumption, this year we're not. And then this other side here, this is our capital spend plan. You can see what we've spent in 2019, 2020, what we budgeted for in 2021, what we're predicting in this first column here, I should say, is these controllable projects. What we're expecting in the controllable projects for 2022, And then what we're kind of forecasting in 2023, and then the overall controllable capital spend over the course of this work plan. The rejected pole replacement, same deal. We weren't able to get anything done in 2019 or 2020 because of the bids. Nobody wanted, no contractor returned a bid for those years. So then in 2020, at the end of 2020, this is the budget number from 2020, sorry, I think. Anyhow, we spent quite a bit, budget this year, budget next year, and then all together, you're looking at the $6 million total spend between these two categories. So in summary, recommending that the board approve the allocation of roughly $1.6 million to design projects in 2021 and 2022 for the controllable projects and reject pole replacements that we feel we need to build in 2022. The actual construction, as well as designing for projects that we expect to build in 2023.
So one thing to know, what I think he said it a few times, is typically when we do our budgeting at the end of the year, we bring all CapEx, right? So it's all like meters, transformers, new services, all those items, and we're still going to do those. Those are more of the uncontrollable stuff. We're going to bring those in, during our normal budgeting cycle, because those aren't really time dependent to get our contractors up and going. The reason we're just calling these out is to not have that whole big bucket and to get going on these early. And one of the ideas that I really like about going ahead and designing some of the projects that we'll probably do in 2023, getting those designed in 2022, is because then the design's done. So if our crews, if new services slow down at one point and we've got the opportunity to do it in-house, we can do it in-house. We'll have them already designed and ready to go. Who knows what the future will bring, but it allows us to do that. Plus we'll be ready for that next year too.
Are there any questions? Yes.
In last year's budget, system sectionalization was huge and that completely fell off the map. I think that needs to be a priority because that cuts down the number of outages. I mean, it doesn't cut down the number of outages, it cuts down the number of members who are out. And it wasn't in this budget at all, and I don't think we did anything with the budgeted money from 2 years ago.
To touch on the system sectionalization, when that project was originally slated prior to me, that was encompassing electronic controls, replacing our OCRs, and all the projects that are in the construction work plan, that's probably the biggest one that it would take a lot of engineering and to figure out your curves to make sure everything coordinates on the system. Right now, if we've got an opportunity to work with our OCRs and to add cutouts, what we call them, or fuses out there to sectionalize, we identified a few places and we'd like to start putting some of those out. But I know that I'm waiting on a little bit of buy-in from some of the guys in the back as far as electronic controls. I want to get them feeling a little more comfortable on it. And then I do intend at some point, I see that happening. I just think at this point, that'd be probably the biggest project we actually have.
I don't see, well, down the road, I could understand the electronic control. Right now, I just think you could put in additional cutouts and cut your outages in half.
That's part of the project. The problem is the man hours needed in order to figure out. The engineering study will tell you, well, kind of here's where you sort of need them, right between this 5 miles of section line. It's something that we don't think we can pull off next year. I completely agree with you, Jeff. It's a very good project to do.
But I think if you started analyzing every outage, I mean, I know there's been a couple that's hit Base Road and it went all the way up to the northern end of the county, and all we had to do was add 2 more cutouts right at coming off the substation where it tees off. That's just one that's simple that's affected me and affected Carl on the other side of the interstate.
That area,
OCRs.
yeah, you wouldn't be able to do an actual fuse because the fuses that we would get, for one, they're one blow. So you're going to.
Yeah, but I think you could move the fuses that you already have cut out. a lot. And again, that's just an opinion. If you start evaluating each outage when you have it, I think it's a simple way to get a head start on this.
But just to clarify the difference between OCRs and fuses, fuses are a one-shot deal. It's basically a cutout, like if you guys have been in the back, where one fault, it blows. An OCR looks like a can. It takes three shots of that fault
open
before it opens. So just to clarify, on our main three-phase lines, we have OCRs out there. And you're not going to, the only time you're going to put a fuse on a three-phase line is when you're going to protect a single-phase tap, is what we would have.
I would suggest that the fuse sectionalization, about the time you think you know where you can sectionalize, then you have an outage somewhere else, and it doesn't help that study. It's a guess game, right? I mean, it truly is. It's where do we think outages are going to occur, and how do we place these in here? And so, sure, you learn your system, and you're right, Jeff. As you get outages, we are evaluating those and taking a look at that. But I think the main thing with that project is it's going to take a lot of work. It also has a lot of dollars in the plan itself today, which we'd have to rewrite the plan in order to take out all those electronic controls, because number one, we just don't have a lot of experience with them. We need to put one or two out there and work with them. I know the guys, for the right reasons, are a little iffy about somebody hitting a button on a computer and it closing in a entire section.
That would be incorporating SCADA into the system.
Yes.
I can also tell you that a single phase reclosure with a control panel is going to cost you about $5,000 each.
But I completely agree. It's a good project and we need to do it.
I'm excited at the idea of that project someday. I just know that there's a lot of front end work that would have to occur before we could ever do what the original plan called for. But what we've got existing with our OCRs, you'd have a 100 amp OCR. That is what it is. It coordinates with the 200 amp breaker in the substation. Beyond it, you might have 70s. Those coordinate for those to operate before the 100s would operate, before the 200s would operate. And then so on and so forth. As you break it down and get into the single phase OCRs, you might have a 35 amp OCR out there. And as that single phase goes down and we split that line up with the device there, you'd have to put like a 25 amp fuse. But the further you go out, the limitations of the fusing to coordinate with what's in front of that becomes to stricken extensively compared to electronic controls, to where now you get into the bandwidth, or not the bandwidth, but the wave form for the fault to come through, to where it could actually burn. It could not cause that to blow, but it's going to operate the device ahead of it.
Coordination is a very tricky subject. It changes based on temperature. It changes based on oil temperature of the can that you're using. It changes based on a lot of different scenarios. The timing of the curve is exponential. So at its lowest set point, it might blow in 5 minutes, but at its quickest, it might blow at, 1/10 of a second.
And one thing to consider is I know that we want to reduce outages, that there is a yin to that yang. If we put fuse cutouts in every place that we can, you're actually going to have more outages, just not as encompassing as many people. So you're going to be rolling crews potentially more often than we would if that line was just protected off the OCR. If the squirrel gets up there and decides to get in the wrong place at the wrong time, if there's a fuse there, it's going to blow. But if you didn't have that fuse there before and it went back to that OCR is going to see that squirrel, it's going to open up and it's going to close back in, see if it sees that squirrel. Well, more than likely after the squirrel's probably already fell on the ground.
Okay.
So then the light blinks one time, no power outage, no crews rolling. So we have to be really cautious on how many fuses we actually put out on our system. But like I was talking about with coordination, the beauty of the electronic controls is that, you can set them, you can make it a 62 amp if you feel like it, if that's what it calls for, and then you can coordinate even you could coordinate it down so precisely, which is inviting and sounds like a great idea. But once again, that would require a huge study by engineering people similar to him.
So I don't have enough time. Yeah, there's not enough man hours in the day. That said, when we come to our regular budget, would you entertain the idea of having that in there to where we can get an engineering firm to do those studies and then perhaps incorporate whatever those studies say into the 2023 construction year.
I would prefer to ask the lineman. I think they have most of the answers to our system. Is what I would prefer.
Absolutely.
Go back a few slides. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Could you go back a couple of slides? Let's see.
Yeah.
Which showed the, okay, right there. So how many poles so far 2021 have been replaced? And is it approximately $3,000 per pole to replace a pole?
And
I don't think that matched the budget numbers in my mind I had.
so the budget numbers for 2020 were different. We started out with that average number of poll based on a lot of assumptions. And then this year, I did not use that assumption.
So what we did to clarify this a little bit, what we did last year and what we've done for every year is we say a three-phase pole average cost is X, right? A single-phase pole is X. Well, let's be honest, every three-phase pole is different construction, right? So what he's done is we now are using the system. We know what that construction of those 50 poles are. So what we do is we build those construction units in our estimating tool that we have, and it pops out using past closed work orders, what our average cost is for that construction unit. So it's not in other words, he didn't build that 490 saying that an average three-phase pole is X amount of dollars. The only reason I had him put the estimated dollars per pole up here was this is probably a hell of a lot more accurate than what we've ever used.
So how many poles have been replaced in 2021? Is 164 doable? I thought like we discussed budget, how many poles in a year generally get replaced? A normal year.
Last year it was around almost 270, I think. And then this year, I think we have about another 200 and,
So 165 is doable in a pole replacement year.
yes.
And this is just pole replacements. This doesn't include new
For some
service.
reason, I thought that number was lower when we were discussing budget, how many had been.
The last year, that dollar per pole, we actually assumed every pole was a three-phase pole. We assumed a certain style of construction. This year, what we did is when the pole inspectors told us it was rejected, they told us what units were, what construction units made up that pole, so we can put that right into our estimating program. And it spits out a fairly close dollar amount. I then just did an average per pole based on the number of poles that we had total. So the pole under the single phase is not going to cost $3,000.
That's just your
But the three-phase is probably gonna
average of everything.
average.
Okay, thank you.
But I thought it was kind of interesting. That's why we threw it up there.
But it could be a hell of a lot more.
Could be a hell of a lot more.
Well, one of those three-phase poles that has a 30-degree angle on it and has a transformer on it and it's double.
Well, I mean, even your average.
Yeah, that's,
I mean, materials are crazy.
yeah.
Yeah, but that's what the
It goes
accounting system,
somewhere, right?
that's what the accounting systems, we have to do a certain average cost. And the way that's done is prescribed by law. So we're using our accounting system the way we would. Now, I can tell you after our regular staking jobs that Brian does, member services and stuff, I end up putting them in there, running an estimate, and they're pretty darn close to what he's estimating and given to the member. So, and I'm talking a lot of times within $400 or $500.
Pat, go back to your comparison, Fuse versus OCR. Fuse is a one-time. If it's gonna get, if it's gonna trip, it's gonna trip and you have to manually reset it.
Yes.
OCR, same circumstances, it may trip it, but it's automatically gonna reset, trip, reset, and if it trips a third time, then you're gonna have to manually reset it. Is that correct?
Yes, and to simplify it from the substation, you have breaker in the substation is a three-phase breaker. So once it leaves the substation and goes to the first set of OCRs, anything that happens on any of those phases, it's going to lock out all three. That's kind of a safety that's built into those. There are other places that do it a little different, but once it goes to the OCRs usually are the ones that protect the main three-phase. You're never going to have a fuse protecting a main three-phase. And then if you have a single phase that branches off and goes quite a distance and has enough load on it to justify an OCR, you'll have that on your OCR, you'll have that on the single phase. But as that single phase goes out, you'll be segmenting your lines with fuses.
Remember that in your house in the old days, you had that little round fuse?
I still have them. What do you know?
I guess he didn't.
I see what you're saying in the old days.
Since you asked the question. No, so when that blew, you had to take it out and put a new one in, right? That's the same thing we're talking about here with fuses. Now with your breaker system, you still have to, today, you have to close it in, but you don't have to replace it. What this does is it automatically closes in a couple of times before it completely locks in the open state.
And we call them breakers, that's Lyman talk, but the real word is OCR, it's oil circuit reclosure. And so
That's changing.
and it's drastically different than what your breaker is in your house, but it looks like a small transformer, but it.
Okay, I was gonna say physically, do they look a lot, fuses and OCRs look dramatically
Oh,
different?
Yes, yes.
The fuse is where you have what we call cutout, and it has that barrel that when it blows, that barrel drops down.
Trips down.
And then on our OCRs, it's internal. It recognizes that fault. It opens, there's contacts that open up, closes back in, opens up, closes back in. Then once it's seen it after the third time, it opens up for good. So that's just that's a reliability. That's why they came out with those. But to touch on what Jeff was saying as far as the fuse coordination, another reason why I'm interested in eventually getting there with the electronic controls is that anytime we can get out of the oil circuit, when I mentioned oil, anytime you can get away from the oil, you're getting out of all the regulations. And if you had a spill and we maintain those every 3 years. We send them in, we take them down. We have a company that redoes the oil in them. They go through all the contacts, replace anything that's worn. Actually, they replace it all anyway, adjust counters, whatnot. So that is the one big pro to the electronic controls, but and then having the ability to set it specific to your line at that particular spot, not just whether it's 170, 50, 35, 25, or your standard OCR amp rated.
The newer ones have no oil to change. There's a lot less maintenance costs on those. So yeah, we would prefer to go to them. It's just a matter of getting the studies done that show us exactly what we need, where we need it, before we can even come to you with a price to say, we're going to spend X amount of dollars on.
I mean, it's not just as simple. I wish it was just to throw a bunch of fuses out there, because when we get down into this, whatever engineer outfit we have come in and do this study for us, they're going to ask us what we want to achieve. What are we going for here? Do you want this line to blink before this blows, or do you want this to blow before this blinks? And really it depends upon what we want to see, So, there is a lot of detail and there's a lot of engineering that goes into fuse coordination. So
There's also what's called fault current, available fault current. The further you go away from the sub, the less fault current you have. You go too far out, that level of fault current is indistinguishable from the load current. So then you have to compromise sometimes and determine, okay, at what level is this part of the line going to have a load that we don't want to see anything blink? If we go over and it opens up, that's no good. Just on a regular overload, that's no reason to do that. But so there's a lot of studies on individual pieces of the system that require. It does take a lot of time to do.
Honestly, the SCADA that we talk about and the fiber, having a fiber network, this all goes into, I don't know if you heard when Brian was talking about, but our grid's not that smart. And as technology has advanced, us being small, we don't have the manpower. We don't have the ability to have the manpower. If we can stop a truck roll because we have smart technology out there, that's actually more beneficial to us than a bigger co-op. And so when he's talking about all these smart devices, that's where we got to go.
Just like anything else, you got to decide which ones you want to use and try to stick with that standard as much as you can.
pros and cons to each vendor and each,
Yeah.
there's not a blue million, but there's quite a few different products out there for electronic controls. But to kind of recap, I guess my layman's way of saying it, I think we've recognized that dealing with contractors that come October, usually they're trying to fill their bucket for the next year. And if we're not getting approved for the allocation of money to go ahead with these projects year over year after year, if we're not getting that till November or December, then we're having a hard time getting these projects engineered, bidded, awarded, materials ordered, whether they're through us or through the contractor, which we've been doing this year, trying to get the contractors to do it. So it alleviates the load on Eric, and we have limited space in our warehouse to begin with. But by the time, and lead time on a lot of these materials is way out.
6, 12.
It's probably growing too.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's gonna get any better. I haven't seen anything that makes me think it is, but it really brings us down to that deadline where it's, you know, even like with tree trimming, you know, it kind of parallels. Are they gonna get it done? You know, and, you know, that's why we say, I don't want you going on that storm. I want you to get this done. I don't want to know at mid-December, you're gonna have to bring in 40 crews to get this done. I don't want to get in that situation. So the further we can get it out there, the sooner we can get everything lined up ahead of time, the better we can get the jobs completed in a timely manner. So that's basically what we're asking for, I believe.
Chris, the 1,637,000, can you show me on the spreadsheet what comprises that number?
Yes. That's the 1.147 plus the 490.
It's all the ones that are in orange.
Okay.
So it's again,
Okay, so there it is at the bottom there.
Yeah.
637, I got you.
sorry, yeah.
So have the linemen bought into this? That
These are their priorities. Yes.
We've definitely talked about it.
Yes.
I'm certain, depending upon which lineman you talk to, or, you know, everybody's got their own opinion. If I ask every single one of them, I won't get the same list, but at some point, it's my job to figure out which ones I feel is the most prioritized.
We actually had a meeting in this room with the entire team in the back. And the thing I appreciate about Pat and Chris is Chris constantly says, we can engineer it this way, we can engineer it this way. They both meet the code and they both meet what we need to do. I'm not the guy out there at 2:00 in the morning having to deal with it. So which one works for you? And so but they all have their own opinions. There's a million different ways to skin a cat. So they all have different priorities, but I would say they're well aware of these and support it for sure.
You might find a particular lineman or anybody else who says, well, I think we should do this instead of this, but that's natural with anything. Anybody who has kids in the room knows that's percent.
I will say.
I'm not comparing them to kids. I'm just saying you can't get everyone to agree on priorities.
And if I will tell you, if you ask somebody what 314-6 is, they're not going to know. If you say primary metering out at X place,
Then they would.
they'll know.
So the ask tonight is for the 1.6, which is $1 million less than 21.
Yes. And that comes in with the multiple year pole replacements in 21 versus 1 year pole replacements in 22.
Will they be able to complete those by the end of the year?
They're supposed to start next week. So they said they got 3 crews. They're going to be working Saturdays. They asked us for permission for that. So they're going to be working 6 days a week. And I think they can. It's going to be tight, but
They're telling us yes, so we'll see.
Yeah, we just have to believe that they will at this point.
I'll make the motion.
And that question right there is exactly what's driving this presentation.
Yeah.
I'll make the motion for the 1.6.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any further questions?
I just want to make sure I understand. So we're talking about a construction work plan for 1,600,000, and this is all inclusive of the construction work plan?
that
No, this is just part of the construction.
That's what I'm saying. This is
Controllables.
This is in order to get in front of it time-wise, in order to get pricing-wise.
yes.
There's more to come.
Our everyday work, our polls that we change every day, our jobs we do every day that are member initiated, the transformers we hang, the meters that we change, that's all part of a work plan. And
This is line 1 on our plan investment.
Correct. Line 1 and
Replacements.
yeah, I think it's line. It's this one here and then. So these.
Oh, good. I just wanted to make sure it was line 1.
Did you get your question answered? Okay. We have a first and a second. Any additional questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Good. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you all.
Let it rip. We'll head into number 8. This quick moment, Brett.
Yeah, so I'll start the cool moment with Dale. I'm sorry, I've waited so long. It's been a while here for a while. So Dale got his CCD accreditation. I assume that's why the different colors. Dan got hers. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And Brian. Boy, but yours was crooked.
I'm a newbie upgrade.
So very cool. Congratulations. For the second cool moment, I'm gonna go ahead and go. Is that okay? Sure. Okay. So second thing, we did, if you guys noticed or were by here, on 9/11 weekend, Pat and his guys, hung the 2 flags with our 2 bucket trucks. We got a lot of, very positive comments about it. I thought it was kind of cool. We have a few vets here, so.
Are all those vets?
No. I don't think all those guys are.
I'm the only one that said that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do kind of want to call out Aaron. He was a big, he kind of spearheaded that with the phone conversation with me
I was just curious. That's fine.
on that.
That's neat.
So anyways, I thought it was really cool. We got a lot of people that called in, talked to me over the weekend that really appreciated it. I thought it was neat. I think we're gonna do it.
Impressive when you drove by. It was really nice.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. There was, as they were hanging it, a few of us were out there watching them and, anybody that drove by honked and
Beeping. We had beeps all day.
I forget the dimensions of that flag, but
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge by huge.
From where the trucks are, when I came in on Monday morning, the wind was blowing and the flag was almost touching the building. And I mean, that's a good 30 foot away at least.
All right, for safety minute, real quick, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence. I don't know if you guys heard or not. UTV basically claimed the life of Madison Man. I don't know if you heard or not. This was one of our fellow family members from the lineman community. It was a Southeastern lineman, had left 2 kids. So if you don't mind, just a minute. All right, so thank you for that. Anyways, we are doing something, is Larry still going?
No.
No, okay. We offered help down there while the funeral was tomorrow. We offered help so that all their guys could go to the funeral. But it sounds like that might.
They have contractors there that work with them year round. They're going to cover that, the call and stuff. So
How old a guy was?
36.
Larry down here, like your Decatur, he was a contractor, worked at Southeastern for a long time. His brother's a superintendent, and he's pretty good friends with the family that suffered that loss. So he wanted to do something he could. He wanted to try to do something, but we were going to let him do cover call, but they've got a hand.
So anyways, when that came up, I thought it'd be a good safety minute. And it's kind of interesting because I did a Google search on, so we have golden rules, and it was actually interesting the other night when we were having outages. I was in here with Pat and Colin, and the guys were leaving, and Pat threw out like the 4 golden rules, right? Make sure your grounds are on, and it's very common language with these guys, and they consistently always remember themselves or remind themselves. So I Googled the golden rules for UTV riding, and there's nothing. So I kind of came up with my four golden rules of UTV riding, but in all seriousness, we know how dangerous these things can be. And I thought it was a safety moment that we'd like. So I'm going to go through the, real quick on the CEO update. You guys got the report. One of the big things was we did finish the 11-1. So policy 11-1, which was the rules and regs for facility credits. It got all the way. And just to kind of let you know, so we have this new NAVEX policy database. And what it does is it brings up things for review. And then also when the board approves a policy, I submit it into NAVEX as a change, and then it goes through an approval process with my managers. And my managers know the change is approved, right? Once that gets approved, I'm the last approver on there. That keeps me in to go put it into call order. So if you look at call to order, your 11.1 and your rules and regs are updated. So there is a mechanism to make sure that you all have the latest and the greatest policies as you change them. So that project was complete. Pat, Sam, and Jenny B went to the MIG. I had several meetings we talked about there. I put SBS Trust Fund, and it's not SBS Trust Fund because SBS has been a word we've been using for months. But it's the actual trust through our IEC when it dissolved. So that got started in our August, and then it will end up towards the end of the year. I think December.
Or the first week or two in December, it'll run out.
So that's all been taken care of. You're going to see it show up in the financials over the rest of the course of the next 3 months. So I'll go over the metrics real quick. So put yourself back in August. So the median temperature, as you can see here in August, was about 4.4 above average. So it was a little warmer. And then if you look at the cooling degree days, there was a lot. And I think that was right around 38% above the 5-year average. So it was a pretty warm August, which is interesting because if you look at the purchased energy, we're right about almost flat really over the 5-year energy. This is purchased energy from Hoosier. And then if you look at demand, we were just a tick over, literally I think it's like right around 1% higher. So kind of an interesting month with as hot as it was. Obviously people weren't either cooling as much or people really got energy efficiency. So if you look at, again, what I'm showing here is just August. So it was interesting to see residential just in August, about 6% above, and commercial continues to be above what was in budget. Industrials continue with the part shortages and are down to our budget, and same thing with our transmission. So overall, you'll see this in Matt's presentation too, but overall, we basically went from, I believe, 1.36 under budget to 1.10. So the hot August did help us, but it wasn't a huge impact. Actually, it was a pretty quiet month when it came to outages. There's nothing that really blipped, to discuss. Lost consumer hours. August is right here. You can see we're much lower than our 5-year average, and then just number of outages, again, a lot less than the 5-year average. Our main things for August were, believe it or not, it's the first time I've seen this one come up in a while. Lightning was number 2, trees was number 1. Crystal's team is doing an excellent job keeping our 30 and 90 day down. You can see we're well below in both areas on our past due. I haven't shown line loss in a while, and I'm going to have to put a note on here, but this was when the whole day or two went into the next month, and it really kind of screwed up. But you can kind of see we're trending pretty much similar. So the blue line is last year, the orange line is this year. You can see we're just a tad bit under it. That makes sense as we're replacing things out in the field or working on stuff. You're putting in newer stuff. That could be the cause of it. Also could be the cause of it is just regular tree trimming will help us out too. So not a whole lot other than this big blip here, which was really caused by the couple days that went over to the next billing cycle. So with that, I'll go over some project updates, which you stole my thunder a little bit there, Chris. I think you gave some of them. So pole replacements, I still have that on track. They're planning on starting next week. Their laydown facility is out of best equipment. That's what they're using to lay down all the equipment. Our construction work plan projects, as you heard him say, two out of 3 are now signed contracts ready to go. The third one, we're waiting on the confirmation from the state on the permits that we'd have to get. Materials been ordered, but we're waiting on those to show up. Vision and strategic planning, I guess we'll talk about here in a little bit. Really what that's waiting on right now is just dates, right? So we need to get a date set. And that's basically all I have from a metric and project updates. Any questions on that?
Any questions for Brad?
What's going on with the easement recording?
The easement recording, Pat.
Jenny B, when we called down there, the courthouse requiring us to get the, I can't think of what it is, but it's the
Property identification.
proper identification that's on the website. So we have to record that. And then Jenny's getting those done in groups and then Brian's submitting. Then he should be doing it weekly.
So it would be on track.
I hope.
I asked that, the reason I went to Pat is because I asked that exact same question yesterday. So we did get, the girls up front, Crystal's girls, helped us out quite a bit on going back. Because if you remember, right, we had to go all the way back through those to find out, has anyone moved that we already had an easement for? And if so, Crystal had to work to talk through those.
Your design for member projects, the
Checklist.
the SOP, the form is off track still. What's going on with that?
What project name and number is it? Oh, mechanism. So he has the form done. The only reason I still have it on here and is red is because he needs to get it into the SOP in our system. So literally it's a formatting and then throw it in the system. So it's basically a written document already done. That's what you're talking about, right?
So are you following it now? I mean, you're using it or?
Yes, we've been using it before it was even wrote.
We've had different modifications over time.
It's going to be a living document that changes. I'm leaving that off track so we don't lose sight that it has to get put into the new format and into the system. But we've been following it honestly since, I don't know, months ago. And it's a living document. We're always going to add to it.
June or July, I think we started using it.
Yeah, probably. And then back on the entire project that we did, I had asked Crystal and I think Chris or Pat the other day, and that seems to be working really good. She just printed some off today and we've got our little binders every single, so anytime we have any interaction with a member coming to us saying, I need work, we're filling out one of those and it seems to be working very smoothly. So we've made a couple modifications as we learn some things, but it seems to be working really good. So.
Yeah, to touch on the design standards, that is definitely going to be a living document. I mean, we all sat down in the boardroom and discussed a whole bunch of stuff. And for one thing, one example is, we want to see road bores instead of if the transfer's on the other side of the road, not to drop one on wire to a lift pole and then go underground. Sounds all great, fine and dandy, but then when you just think about it in the office, well, then all of a sudden you start thinking about all those places that exceed the limit of the wire capabilities as far as voltage drop. That's not a possibility because your transfer is no longer
Close enough
to there. So that's every situation is going to dictate something different, and it runs into the whole idea of, well, what if somebody wants a temporary? How are we going to play that? What if somebody decides they want a security light by the end of their driveway where that lift pole normally is? So we have to really think through that. We just can't throw a blanket and say, no more of this. It's a living document.
All right, thanks, Brad. Hey, let's go back and we need to approve previous month's minutes. Meeting minutes. Do you want to take a look at that?
I have a change to make. The very last is 12:09 PM. That should be changed to 12:09 AM. One letter.
And I thought it was 12:13, but
It could be 12:09 or 12, but it needs to be AM, not PM.
So interesting enough, Brian's looking at it and is confused because Jeannie caught that right before this meeting when she printed them. She changed it on the one you signed.
Dale, were you gonna make a revision?
no, I'm just kidding. I caught the A. Did Suzanne, but
All right, so with that change in mind, I still need a motion.
with Suzanne's changing.
Get a first, need a second.
I'll second.
Get a second. All in favor, say aye. Abstain. Been approved. Matt, I think we're ready for.
You want this or you want me to click through it?
You can click, I've got it on my.
Maybe I can put it. Well, I'll tell you what, technology has been struggle.
ID 10T here.
All right.
So our balance sheet, there's been very little change in the last month. Total assets of $56,877,000 or $877,645. So our liabilities continue to drop as we make payments, and other than that, everything's pretty much about the same as it was. Any questions on the balance sheet? Next, we have the statement of operations. Year to date, our operating revenue of $22,623,000 is down about about $1,264,000 from budget. So that's off by about 5%. Our lower budgeted revenue, residential's under, commercial's over, and as Brett showed on the earlier slide. And our power cost is also under by a little bit more as our power cost follows our revenue with that. So our gross margins are 56,000 above budget, so about just under 1%. Then controllable expenses are under by 445,000. As Brett mentioned, the statewide trust was dissolved, and we will be taking that against benefits for the rest of the year till probably the first week in December. In the month of August, it worked out, it was about $30,000 is what hit then. For the total though, for the year, we will wind up $167,000 under budget on that. So as we apply it, and it will all be used up by the end of the year. It should be the first payroll in December. It'll run out, or the second. There might be just a little bit left. Then fixed expenses are under by about 1.7%. Our non-operating income expense is over, and that's due to the Hoosier Energy being better than we expected. So our margins for the year, the actual was $1,407,000, which is about $586,000 better than budget to date. Is there any questions on the statement of operations? Next, we have cash flow. Our ending balance at the end of the month is about 2.5 million, which is about 131,000 less than last month. Next, we have our gross margin metrics. You can see our 5-year average. Our sales are under budget and under the 5-year average, but the power cost isn't. So when it comes down, the margin is a hair over. So year to date, the margin is just a tick ahead of the budget. Next, we have the kilowatt and sales breakdown. As you can see, as Brett had this slide earlier, we're under by 1.1% in total. The industrial is under, and the transmission is under, commercial is over, and residential is pretty much right in line.
There's just not been a whole lot in these charts that really stick out to me.
And then next we have our controllable expense metrics. Most everything is just a hair under budget, which is the 400 and some odd $1,000 from the second slide. And then last week I did update the cash projections. I left $100,000 in December because if all the poles get replaced on time and everything else hits the way it could, we might have to borrow money for a week or two. So we could potentially borrow some money in December. So I would say the odds are not real high, but there's still a chance, and I didn't want to take it completely off unless we were certain that we wouldn't do it. So, but I did take it down significantly.
And we're in process now. So Jenny did meet with all managers from our LE standpoint, which affects this cash flow, right? And so everyone's kind of taking their shot at where we think they're going to end up next month. So as a team, I've actually looked at that again and really shore up what we think our LE looks like. what do we actually think is going to get done so that we can predict what we think the margin is going to look like? Because it's going to be a lot less than what we're showing, obviously, for this month to compare to what it's going to look like, because we have the huge construction work plans coming from a cash flow standpoint. But we do know admin in general is going to see, quite a bit of dollars in this whole benefits and labor thing. Also, Matt started later in the year than we had budgeted. So we're going to see that at A&G will be under budget. Maintenance on that one slide, again, it's down below right now just because of right of way, right? And so we've got some plans in place to really get that in. So the only other places are operations being under a tick and billing and member services being under a tick, and corporate just a bit because of this, again, which is a good thing, right?
Are you actually going to pay for the construction work plan, all these projects by the end of the year? I mean, are you going to be invoiced by the end of the year?
It's the plan.
We plan on having them invoice us every month. So as they complete work with pole replacements, it's a little bit different. We split that up into like 10 or 11 different work orders. So as they get one completed, they'll bill us for that one work order. We'll pay that out. So it's not, I don't expect us to have one big bill after the job is done. I expect us to have smaller bills throughout.
Is there a scenario where you prepay that to get it on 21?
Well,
Possibility.
if they finish the work on December 31st and they invoice us on the 10th of January, we're gonna accrue it into the year the work was finished. So
The big thing is like you said, getting the work done.
Yeah.
Because then from accounting rules, we can always. The big unknown right now is this project 3. If they're going to the state right now, seeing if they can get permits, that could be 3 months. Well, if it's 3 months, guess what? They're not going to get it done. And that's a driver. All these other little things aren't going to drive that number.
Yep, thanks, Matt. All right. So I left the officer elections optional. As of now, I'm not prepared to really take a vote. If anyone has any comments about it? Anybody? All right, we'll go on to number 13, the transformer inventory aspect.
So the basic deal here is we've identified in our risk assessment, the lead times are starting to get long. For some of these larger these are all 3-phase, couple points to make. And I think I put this in the memo, but these are all 3-phase. They're not like completely oddball stuff. They're just, the lead times are getting longer. The ability to be able to get our hands on one of these is starting to diminish. And therefore, to us, it's a much bigger deal now. These ones that we're buying, we're only talking about buying one. The other thing is these are basically repaired. They rework them, right? So it's refurb. They aren't new. We thought if they're going to be sitting out, in our back as a spare inventory, that rework would be good.
Generally, the lead times for rework are less than for brand new ones.
Right.
Brand new ones can take 6 months or better, depending on the size. Even 3 years ago, it was actually around about 8 to 10 weeks as a normal frame of business, which is fine. Now we're seeing them out months and months. Even the rebuild shops are starting to be about 14, 15, 16 weeks when they used to be 1 or 2 weeks. So.
And, one of the questions and things that I was asking Chris when we originally looked at this is, could we originally, we thought Brownstown would have these in the pool and they don't. That's our normal pool. And then we talked about, well, what other REMCs could we go get these from? And it comes down to, if I have a 2000 and someone around us needs one and the lead times get longer than they already are now, that's a tough call. I mean, what do? I could say, sure, here it is, and then we have one go bad. I would assume I wouldn't have a job if that happens. So, I mean, the lead times are getting worse and worse on these. We feel like it's a very smart move to have inventory of these. We did go ahead and pull the trigger and had the ones we have out back that we do, not these, but other ones, some of the oddball stuff that we do keep in the back. We had those retested just to make sure that because they've been sitting back there for God knows how long. So we had those retested. We'll put these in that pile with them. So this isn't really a play on when do we think we're going to use these. It's really a play on a backup. That's really all it is. These are going to sit. I mean, I hate to say it. I hope we never use them because if we have to use them, it's because it's a backup.
Insurance.
It's insurance.
So you've got 7 specialty transformers, what this is saying.
So these are our specialty. They're standard size, standard voltages throughout the industry. It's just that in a rural area, you don't see these sizes very often.
So can you get 2 and then fuse them down instead of buying 7?
We might be able to get by that way, because I got like got a 2000 and 1500, So we might be able to do that, buy one of the higher sizes that fit on the same pad as one of the.
Instead of having 7 specialty items, just have 2 that's interchangeable.
Another thing to look at is also is having them available for an industry that comes in. We get a lot of people build stuff, and I mean, not so much the industries, but even with like new services that require 3-phase, they say we want 3-phase. Okay, what voltage do you want for 3-phase? I don't know. Well, if you need a 240 480 or a straight 480 or 277 480, I mean, there's so many variations. If we don't know that, and we got to make sure we have it.
I think he's just saying basically the sizes. A lot of them are actually 480.
7, they're all cabinet for industry, right?
Yes.
So that's where you could fuse them down and still make it work.
Potentially.
And maybe you need 3. I don't know what the number is, but I think you could buy cabinets that were interchangeable and not have 7 sitting there that we might never use. And
it's
understandable.
We can definitely look.
Take a look at it.
We can definitely look and see what voltage type has.
I've got that down. It's a matter of the physical size.
Yeah.
And whether it's going to fit where the one that's out in the field is today.
Yeah, these are all sized to fit over top of the box, right? There's a hole there in a box. Well, if you get something that's smaller, you can't. But we can definitely go back and look and see, can we combine, or can we get by with less by just being able, and I answered the question in here, the first question that came to my mind is what do we do if one blows today? Well, the answer is we're going to get the lights back on, but it's going to be piecemealed and it's going to be ugly. And at the end of the day, it's going to cost more than what having a piece of air is. It's just an insurance plan. Again, I think with the lead times getting worse and worse, but we can go back and look at this list and definitely see if we can pare it down, or what might work. You're right. It's going to come down to size, like physical size.
Yeah, but I think that's a good suggestion. That's
Absolutely.
Yeah.
prudent approach.
Is it critical to get that approved before next meeting?
I mean, if you,
At this point,
who knows? It's a roll of the dice. That's when I think somebody asked me, I think Clay may have asked, is how critical is this? I mean, I don't know. Tomorrow one could go bad.
Yeah, but you pretty much have cabinets that we can make it work.
And
That's what I'm saying. So we'll get the lights back on. And again, but if we can buy 2,
right.
it's interchangeable.
these are sizes that we have none of for that type KVA size and voltage.
I mean, if we buy a 2500 and it can sit on the same pad of a 2000 or a 1500 that went bad, we could put that 2500. We might run into the possibility of our bushings being, the 2500, the bushings this high, on the 1500, the bushings this high. So now we have to splice our primary to get to that bushing, but we at least have the transformer and then make those splices. And that is an option. That is.
What's the chances we go back, Chris, and we're going to eliminate any of these with the actual sizes being the same?
Typically, probably the 2000 and 1500 are going to be your closest size. I wouldn't want to put a 2,500 on something that was made for a 2,000 because of the weight differential. To give you an idea, the 2,500 we have sitting in the back is 20,000 pounds.
Yeah.
The one we're ordering for a new business is 14,000 pounds. So there's a lot of variability there.
To answer your question, Steve, I mean, I don't know. My guess is the lead time's going to get worse and worse and worse. I mean, the longer you wait, the worse it can be, but.
I will add this into the mix. We originally got the quote, it was a 30-day quote. We're past that timeline, so we'll have to re-quote.
But regardless, we're basically waiting on, everybody's gonna check to see what's in inventory to find out what we're gonna need. Am I hearing that correctly?
See if
Maybe just-
No,
we can pare down that list based on physical size.
If we could do it. How long, like, can you, is that something you can do in like a matter of minutes?
Probably be a day or two.
Okay.
It gets a little, every manufacturer makes theirs different. They do it on purpose.
Sure they do.
You know, you can have a 500 KVA that fits perfectly on that pad. You order another 500 KVA and you need it like now, or you got a 500 KVA that doesn't even fit on that pad. And then you have open voids for people to put their hands up in the 7,200, you know, that's not good, you know?
And the rebuild shops have a bunch of old ones sitting there waiting to be reconditioned. Got a lot of orders to do it. But some of them are older and they are bigger and have more oil and weigh more. And some of them are newer and smaller. And so you have to almost ask them what size that you've got, what's your physical size? So I can see if that lines up with.
Almost go out in the field and physically
Measure.
And it's not just the size of the pad, it's the opening that's within the pad.
That the cables come up and
Yeah.
into the transformer.
We actually had that happen out of Valio. We had a transformer we had to replace. And for whatever reason, the transformer, not our fault, but the wrong transformer came. And we still needed it that day. But fortunately, the new transformer that came was smaller than the original transformer. And it left the void and we had to come up with solutions. We cut a box pad and then drilled it into the fiberglass pad that it sat on just to cover that void. We lucked out, but if that transformer came, and it was too big.
If somebody were to walk by and stick their foot in that hole that's exposed, that's a bad idea.
Well, so we'll go back and see if we can combine any of this.
Okay.
I'll just send out an email and if you want to approve it through email, we will. If not,
That's what I was asking the question.
Yeah. I have no idea. I mean, one of these could blow tonight. I don't know.
I did actually, and I don't have it with me, it's in my office, but I did go through the ones that we have out on the system. And a lot of them are 30, 40 years old. Some of them are less than that. Some of them are only 6 or 7 years old. So when you start taking into the life expectancy of these things, which might be depending on how hard they're ridden over the years, you know, they might be fine for another 20 years. You don't know.
Okay.
Next item, I'm here to elect the IEC representative. And, one nomination. This is by secret ballot. I don't know, Brett, if you have.
Oh, I forgot them, but I can go get them real quick.
So do we have any nominations?
Yes. Are you still willing? Okay, then I'll nominate you.
Still need a second.
I'll second.
Do we have any additional nomination? Yeah. All in favor?
I'll need the ballots.
I was gonna say, we may not, I think we sent ballots, I guess, somebody could write in somebody else's name, but. I lost it.
Well, we also need to donate for their annual meeting then.
I don't think we're not gonna follow that. Oh, is that in?
On the packet.
It's in the back of the
So you need to elect somebody for the annual meeting.
I missed that second part.
Yeah, you need to elect a actual IEC director and then a representative for the annual meeting.
Okay.
Alternate.
Well,
Well, you don't necessarily need an alternate. That's up to you. You don't have to. You say chairman on the top, but you can just mark it up, but IEC.
I think we already. I don't think that.
we will for the, we may for the, I just missed what you just said. Delegate. Did we come up with the delegate?
No, we're still working on the
Okay.
director. Did you close the nomination?
I didn't. Okay. Somebody made a motion and Suzanne seconded it. Jason made the motion. And did we have somebody close? No, I mean, I said we need to, I guess, close the nominations.
Oh, someone has to make a motion.
Yeah,
I'll make the motion to close.
okay. That will second. Second that.
Okay, I'll second.
You're seconding that. I don't know if we, I guess for clarification, let's go ahead and vote. I know that sounds, but it says it needs to be secret ballot, so.
Is there only,
One, yeah. you're saying-
just do it out loud then,
I'm fine with that.
as long as everybody's okay.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Right, thank you. Sorry about the confusion. Okay, now we need a delegate. A delegate for the annual meeting.
They don't have to be there both days, right? Or do they?
No, did you do that last year, Brian? We were just.
Well, 2 years ago.
They didn't have it last year.
Well, it's still virtual. Michael was, you just everything one day?
I did 2 years, yeah, just one day.
Yeah. So the delegate would be responsible either, probably just for one day. Need a,
I nominate Clay.
Sounds like you guys worked that out ahead of time.
Then he wasn't busy till the 11th, so. The 6th and 7th.
It's right before.
Jason nominated Clay.
Was that his acceptance?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any other nominations?
He's laughing.
We can just do a hand vote. All in favor of Clay being delegate?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Clay. Congratulations.
So I can laugh.
All right. Sorry that I answered.
That's okay.
Eye contact. Check out.
All right, next topic, boardroom safety measures, Brett.
So I'm just looking for guidance here. So as a part of our safety committee, it was brought up, the risk in here of members, and I don't know if all of you have heard or not, there was an upset, I don't even remember what state this was in, but there was an was it Tennessee?
Well, maybe not.
I don't remember exactly. Anyway, there was a parents of a student that got upset with the school board, and they went in and to a board meeting and basically shot them all. So it came up in here. So what we did is we did so it's not necessarily members actually showing up at the meeting in the back getting upset, right? This is more of like, you shut me off, or, it could be anything. And so it's something I think you have to talk about, because if it happens, it's okay, right? So anyways, we had IEC come in and look at our setup in here. And if you've noticed, we changed the last couple months. So there's they really wanted a walkthrough so that folks on that side can get out and folks on this side can get out if one of the two exits is blocked. And they wanted no backs, or they suggested no backs of anybody that's in the room. So as you can see, we've got now the members can sit back there. There's two openings here, and then we're on the side. So that was the change we incorporated. If you guys are fine with that, we can close it out and say that's the change. If you think, the only other thing I can really think of is close the meeting, or you have an armed guard, or you have an unarmed guard. I don't know.
Were those the only suggestions they made?
That was the suggestions they made, is to have either an armed person, like a sheriff, off duty, somebody would do it, but it's going to cost you.
No, our other RMCs,
No, most RMCs don't have their boards open.
I understand that. Yeah, but
I feel secure the way it currently is.
Dale? You feel that?
I don't have any, feel confident it's here, sent by Susan. and-
You know, one other thing I just thought of.
Take care of you.
You guys are lost spray on
Take
here?
care of you.
You know,
I got my hornet spray. Spray the 12 feet.
Wouldn't shoot.
what do you guys think about once the meeting starts? 15 minutes in, we lock the front door.
I don't think there's a need.
I'm secure the way, but as of now, everybody.
I don't think it's necessary.
I'm sure that school board didn't think it was necessary either.
Is that, what if someone couldn't get here right at the meeting they wanted to?
So there's a contact that maybe we can.
I don't know. Again, we felt comfortable with the measures we took. It's fine, but it's really ultimately your call. It's your safety.
If you lock the door, then you'd be locking everybody in as well.
True. Well, true. Because that front door, you'd have to turn it to get out. And it's sometimes not a panic bar
But in this room, you got an exit right up there.
unless there's somebody standing there.
Right.
Yeah, unless that's where they came in.
So is everybody okay with what IC helped out with? We need to go.
Thanks.
Do we need to do anything else at this point? Everybody's good with it? Okay.
Kevlar vests.
Kevlar
Kevlar vests.
and hopefully. All right, the next item. It's the review of policy 1A. We actually talked about it the last previous 2 months, if I'm not mistaken. We don't have the revision on here. If everybody can go back to August's meeting. I know there were some red lines there, and I also asked everyone to take a closer look at it to see if thought the wording should be changed. If you look at that policy and it's redlined in the August board meeting as well. If you want to look at what's redlined, we added for the new directors when their first retainer would be earned. And then
Mine's not redlined.
It says red, and underneath it says red line. That's the good one.
Thank you.
pardon,
August.
Okay, so it's just the one, it's just the
well, it's just the one.
section 2C.
Flag is striked out.
Oh.
And B is marked out. And if somebody feels the need that we should retain what's in part B, we can leave it there. But I'm also concerned about the last sentence of part A. If the meeting itself is under 2 hours, the director shall receive 1/2 stipend. I mean, I like the idea, but I'm not convinced that we need to be more, we may need to be more specific. What if it's a 3-hour event to get to the meeting, 2 hour? I don't know, I'm just.
Oh, you mean your travel time or whatever the case is, so that your elapsed time is greater than the 2 hours?
Maybe I'm just reading into it.
Has there ever been a board meeting under 2 hours?
We came close 3 months ago. Leading thought.
So, I mean, is it, and I guess there would be probably maybe some committee meetings that would be under the 2 hours. More so committee than board.
We've had some special board meetings, definitely under 2 hours.
Well, I was thinking specific to last year. I think it was in December when we had to do it. I don't know if it was a telephone conference or if it was virtual.
Probably.
It was in December, if I'm not mistaken.
Here. A says, will a stipend of $254 regular special commitment for any board directors? Doesn't.
It doesn't what, Dale?
It doesn't distinguish
Oh, between the special,
regular and special.
versus committee. But I think that last sentence was trying to support if it is less than the 2 hour time frame. Jason, what are you thinking?
I don't interpret it that way, but It says if a director attends other REMC business requiring at least 1/2 day, you'll get 1 stipend. If the meeting itself is under 2 hours, you'll get 1/2.
Okay,
So I think that's separate from the,
so you're saying, and I understand what you just said, it's based upon,
but I'm no lawyer. That's just my
I
interpretation.
think you're thinking it pertains to that other
Yeah.
REMC business.
Yeah.
I mean, we can leave it as is, but I don't think we need any information really on. Is that what your thoughts?
I agree. I think it's probably best as.
Just leave it as is. Are you guys okay with what's been redlined and what's been marked out?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, then I need a motion to approve what we.
Yep.
Are you making a motion?
Whatever.
I need a motion to approve the red line changes then. Like, okay. Second, did you second it, Carl?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say. Okay, we got through that. And I think Brad, you are talking about changes to.
So in policy tech, which has all of our policies, fees, rates, everything in there, we got everything on a review cycle. So the idea is, you know, we need to review our policies to make sure we're following what it says we're doing, or if it's outdated and hasn't been reviewed in a while, that we're reviewing it. So they're coming up now, and actually Crystal said, if it comes up for review and it says general manager and your title's not general manager anymore, can we just change it? And I said, well, technically it's a policy and the board needs to approve. So, and it's literally a title change.
Yeah, but is it going to change all of the letter numbers and then the dates adopted? Because like,
It will change the dates adopted,
it's
yes.
like the policy manual was implemented in 63. I think this is crazy to be changing that to just, that'll change that date to this year.
So it looks like it's updated now.
Right,
I see what you're saying.
because of one more.
No. So so the whole idea is when the policies come to us,
Yep.
we are going to look at it. And if it needs updates, so if it hadn't been updated since 1968, right? We're gonna look at it.
Yeah, but why change it if all we need to do is review it?
We're gonna review it anyway, don't we?
Well, you'll show a review date on here, but if we change one word, you're changing the adopted date.
Yes, we will.
So I think that's a lot of.
But isn't that what you want?
Yeah, I would say. Now,
But isn't it in the bylaws where you can be called either the general manager or the CEO? So we're
I did
covered.
see it, I saw it in there as well.
It is there.
It's totally up to you. I don't care either way.
The bylaws, general manager as CEO, there's really no need to handle or make changes of it.
I don't care. I just wanted to make sure that if we're looking at this stuff, we're making sure that stuff. matches.
Everything. If there's a period that needs to have a period,
Consistent. Sure.
we're gonna bring it up.
There's a bylaw that states it, and there's no really.
There is a
I'm
bylaw.
sure there is a bylaw. I've never.
I don't.
Well, let's look. I saw it, I looked.
I know I read it someplace.
I just read it this week but
No president.
there was something about general manager, CEO. But I will say that I looked up the definition. CEO, I believe is a better definition to use for policy than general manager.
We don't care.
And if we don't care, but let me see if I can find that. Let's real quick.
We thought this was changing and, right?
President shall also be general manager, section 611.
President,
I would say CEO.
not the,
Yeah, you are.
I guess you guys, yeah. But that doesn't mean you have to vote me that.
I'm just saying, it seems like a lot of changes that don't really need to happen.
We got to review it anyways.
We can review them all. I love to review them. I just don't want to make changes for that one word. And a new adoption date.
The president shall also be general
We need
manager.
to change when we review it. Why
Is
don't
there a way
we review?
can state on there that? I guess it would be.
The point is, we have to bring it up in Word to review it. So all we're doing is taking out general manager, putting in CEO, resubmitting it for approval. If something needs to change on it, if it's outdated and it needs to be reviewed, honestly, if I get one, once it comes up to me and it hasn't been reviewed by the board since 1968, I don't care if we think there's changes or not, it's coming to the board.
Yep, and we review it, but it doesn't change the adoption date. And it doesn't change anything.
Adoption date, you lost me. I have
It's
no
on the
idea.
bottom of every.
What does that have to do with, who cares?
Why does that matter to you?
Because that would look like what board adopted it for that time. 5 years from now, it'd be what board was on there.
Does it say adopted or revised?
They say both. They have the adopted and the reviewed date.
But 6.11 umbrellas and
And you-
encompasses all that.
I believe when you revive it, you're the new adoption. But again, that's my thoughts.
I don't care. I mean,
I don't know what makes any difference with the adoption date is.
What do you? When you bring them up for review?
That's what we're doing. That's what I'm saying. When we review a policy that comes up and says we need to review it, we're changing.
Board reviews it, not when you review it, when the board reviews it. You have to bring it to the board, review it, and then we review it. Am I correct about that?
It doesn't matter to me either way. Just,
I'll still toy with the idea of a motion. Somebody make a motion.
I mean, what we've been doing is when we change it, just change that too.
I think that's what Carl suggested.
But if we do that, then it's gonna have a different date.
It will change the date. But really, what makes the difference?
That's what I mean. We'll just bring everyone here.
Yeah.
We don't have that many that we do every month.
No,
Yeah, but
I mean, honestly, it's not a bad thing to do anyway. But you guys are gonna have a lot to review.
Like Jeff says, he loves reviewing them.
To me, that's exactly why you have the chronology at the bottom of the policy that says it was initially instituted, here's when it's been reviewed. I mean, I don't see the issue with having another reviewed at the bottom of it. Another review date.
Well, what Jeff's saying is if we change general manager to CEO, then that adoption date would go to the new date.
No, the adoption date stays the same. You're gonna have a reviewed date.
Unless you change it.
Not the way they're doing it, Dale.
If you change policy, then
You change the wording is changing the policy?
it changes the adoption.
So instead of 1968, it's going to say 2021.
Correct.
And it's going to look like the current board did the policy.
So
But
can,
really, it probably needs to be reviewed if it's 68 by the board.
I agree.
so
I don't think there's an issue with us reviewing them.
can you, so if you make any change, it's an adoption, it's not a review?
That's the way I,
The way it's been handled
That's what they have.
so far.
Maybe we should look into that a little bit further, because I think.
You have a revision date?
I would like to.
It usually means that you looked at it, you made no changes, and revised means you actually made changes.
Yeah,
I
can't,
can't say we just go on like we're doing today. I mean, it really isn't, it doesn't really matter either way. I mean, if it comes up into my system and it hasn't been reviewed since 1968, it doesn't matter if it says CEO in it, you're gonna review it because we need to be, right?
We get that pull top switch one figured out.
Yeah. Yeah, that one needs to be reviewed. We'll go course like what we're doing today.
Okay, really doesn't matter to me. So, there's a recommendation, talking about the November and December board meetings. Typically, we do it in October. I think it's a good idea. Tuesday, the 23rd, for our November meeting. Same time, 6:30. And then the December board meeting, move from the 23rd to that Tuesday. The suggestion. If you have the opportunity to look at your calendars now, I think it'd be great. Can we do that?
The November is fine with me, the December, it's not. As of this minute,
Wednesday.
this minute.
Would. I mean, we just picked Tuesday because that's kind of,
Is the week prior an option?
That would be too early, probably. That means, well, that's gonna be the 15th, 16th, which is what we're proposing. I'm gonna look at that in a second. Let's go back to November. Is everybody good with the Tuesday, 23rd of November?
You're okay with November? Is it possible your December will change?
Possibly I will be out of town 16th through the 20th.
December.
As
But
of this
November,
minute.
we could go ahead and
Mhm.
address the November and get it done now.
That's why I'm saying, let's complete it and we'll talk about December in a moment.
You know, things change, but as of this.
So, does November work for everyone? Please raise your hand if it does.
Right now, yeah.
Okay, thank you. We're kind of etching this in stone as of now. Kind of.
You need to make a motion and approve that if it's a board date change.
Yeah, that's true too. Okay, let's,
I'll make the motion that for the November 2021 board meeting, we reschedule it from Thursday, the 25th to Tuesday, the 23rd of November.
begin at 6:30.
I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye. We got November taken care of.
Have Thanksgiving dinner here together.
Oh, yeah. Let's look at December. So you're saying the 23rd, or excuse me, the
I will have 100% confirmation the first week of October. Is that,
the date I heard you say though, like about the 20, would the 22nd work?
I'll have,
Anytime that week's fine. I just didn't think you wanted to.
Okay.
I will have confirmation the first week of October. Is that too late to decide? That's 2 weeks away.
We just decide on that one next month.
Yeah, that's fine.
Good.
The only problem with moving it up now that I think about it is, so the 15th and the 16th is when we're doing strategic planning, we're saying, and then 16th is when we do the budget presentation. So any time that we may, depending on what all gets asked for, I don't, yeah. Gotcha. That could be a problem.
Does generally strategic planning happen before the budget's created though?
It usually happens, but way before the
In the perfect world,
perfect world, for sure.
not the week of the budget.
For sure. I would love to do this strategic planning next week. And we could plan for it in the budget, but
I mean, the budget doesn't have a specific deadline. I know it's up the end of the year, but we're still going to function, you know, as a company without a budget. But wouldn't a strategic planning event in a perfect world filter into what the budget entails?
100% agree with you. We couldn't find a date. It's essentially what it came down to.
I know with everyone's schedules, with
It is tough trying to get staff and all your schedules and then
Brian,
Brian,
And we've been talking about this since July.
I've been working on this date literally or Steve and I for a month.
But is strategic plan necessary if the budget's already created and ready to be presented?
Yeah, because what you guys are going to do, honestly, so we're going to create with staff, we're going to create initiatives, high level initiatives, right? And then what I'm going to do is create project teams. So all employees will be on a project team. This is exactly how we did it last time. We will create the actual projects and come back to the board with, here's the projects to complete this initiative. So you're talking a 6-month process to create that anyway. So quite honestly, if none of the outputs of strategic planning will happen until 2023 anyway.
so it may not have a major impact for us this, right? If we,
Well, it's not. We won't have anything.
The timeframe to have the strategic plan done by the end of the year, because it's not going to impact the 2022.
Not necessarily. It's just how far do we put it off?
Inevitably, probably it's not going to impact the budget then.
No, but you're right. There's not a deadline at the end of the year for strategic planning done. It was kind of my and Steve's goal.
I will say, in my experience in the past, strategic planning in the places I've been before has been more of a 4 or 5 year outlook on large, very large, sophisticated projects, not your big construction.
Well, it's not even going to be projects, though. It's going to be initiatives. But yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
like PMI or something like that.
Much more high level.
high level.
Yes.
Visionary. It's what do you want to
I mean, we need to make decisions on like, what are we gonna do?
Sure.
Are we gonna be an electric company or are we gonna start doing other services? Are we gonna, I mean, we need
It's
to,
high level.
we need to figure that stuff out.
Right, and that's stuff that doesn't necessarily impact immediate,
Budget, it won't.
yeah.
It'll be 6 to 8 months after we land on, here's the initiatives for my team to create the projects that meet those initiatives for sure. And Steve and I had talked about, let's just wait until the beginning of the year for strategic planning, but
Well, so let's talk about next week, the 16th. Did I hear a moment ago that you will know something the 1st of October? Is that correct? How about everyone else on the 15th and 16th? Now it's good, or
It's good for me.
Jeff, are we good?
They can,
Carl,
Is that meeting gonna be mandatory?
pardon me?
Well, I've got knee surgery coming in. And I can be able to make it at the December one. And November's no big problem, but the December late, but the 15th and 16th, I may be a little bit on. I could probably make it. I'll be all right. Might hobble in here, but it might be all right.
we got to figure out what we're gonna do it too. So we could do it here, but we also thought about doing it off-site somewhere, so. I mean,
Make sure you get up there, Carl, but
pick you up if we have to.
because in conjunction with that, the intent would be to wrap up the 2022 that portion of the day. Because I think it's only, the strategic event would only be like half.
Well, the plan was to plan for 2 days, knowing that we think we could finish it in a day and a half. So we'll just have to make sure we finish it in a day and a half. And I don't know what the budget presentation probably took us hour and a half, 2 hours. I mean, you're talking still probably 8, 9 in the morning till 1.
Oh, yeah, it's to be,
Still gonna be 2 pretty good days.
okay, we good with that? You let us know.
But I thought what we could do on the 15th and 16th is, go to dinner or something, like my staff and the board, kind of have just a social dinner together. On the 15th.
Okay. All right. Hoosier Energy, or excuse me, Hometown Energy.
No meeting.
Jason, Hoosier.
Had a finance and audit committee meeting on the 13th of September. We reviewed the new rate redesign. It's not going to be approved until October, so after it's finalized, we'll bring that to the board. There aren't really any unexpected changes. They're shifting demand and energy, and the excess K-bar has kind of gone up quite a bit, but we only have 3 industrial meter points that's really triggered, maybe a time or 2, but it's not a large dollar amount, and key accounts is going to work with the folks to see if there's something maybe they can do to help them. We had a lot of discussion on the stranded cost recovery for Merom and the decommissioning costs associated with that. Once that's decided how that's going to be handled, I'll be bringing that to the board. And then there was a lot of discussion about mandatory vaccination for employees because of the size of Hoosier.
Really?
And what's going to happen when, or if some key folks decide they're not going to be vaccinated. So something I hadn't really thought about.
They have exemptions allowed, or would they allow exemptions?
All right now. So, and they're expecting that to be implemented, like the first week or week and a half of October. So they're kind of trying to plan ahead. Hey, if this case happens, what are we going to do? So, but they're working on that, and that's it.
Okay. As far as IC goes, there was no meeting in September. There is one in October. And I'll report out that. Anybody have any training this month? I think so.
Steve, I do still have the CEO
Oh, that's right.
focus that I got the slides now.
Yeah.
So I've got it as an action item on my list of I want to report out to them, because there was some pretty good stuff
Right, okay,
I took away from that, so it's still on my list. I just.
okay.
I do have a question, Jason, on the, on the KVAR, on the Access Net KVAR. I guess I don't understand how that really affects Hoosier, because it's all coming through the same substation that we pay for otherwise. I mean, I realize that it's a policy rather than a,
Well, it's big, they're penalizing those folks, basically.
right. But I'm saying is that the meter that they use is there. This stuff comes through our lines from their, you know, and I realize they do what they can to try to remove it from our billing from the substation. But I think that if you look at moving them from the Hoosier industrial rate tariff, then that goes out the window. It's just whatever our rate tariff is at that point.
No,
It's not being removed.
Yeah, no. It's just being it's being trued up to their actual.
It's going up. The penalty's going up.
Right, I get that. What I'm saying is that how it's calculated isn't really, I don't think it's fair for one. I think it's a little more paperwork that needs to be done than necessary, because they're taking that data. They have a meter at the sub, they have a meter at our member's place, and they're removing the data from the member data from the substation and then figuring that out. However, what really happens on their lines is all what happens at that substation meter. So you're penalizing someone for something that may not have an associated cost to Hoosier, is what I'm getting at.
I think that'd be a great discussion for you and key accounts. Because you're out of my wheelhouse.
Don't worry,
You're out of mine too.
Mark and I talk about this stuff.
Okay. All right. It's not going like that.
I don't think I'm married to him. My wife does the same thing.
All right, I need a motion to adjourn.
So move. Second.
Adjourn. We will go into executive session for a short period of time.